Once again, we're going to start from the beginning, start from the top. This is the City Council Committee on Finance meeting. It's Tuesday, May 5th, 2020. We're going to call this to order. Madam Clerk, could you please roll call?
Chairman Elaine.
Present, please.
Vice Chairman Ryan.
Present.
Theo. Is Councilman Anthony.
Present.
Taylor.
Here.
We have present, one absent, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Council President Matos is present. Council President Pro Tem Correa is present. Councilman Pedro Espinal is present. Councilwoman Kat Kerwin is present. Councilwoman Miller, I believe, is present too. And we'll move as we, anybody else I missed, we'll go from there.
So noted.
Before we begin the meeting, I want to take a note to thank the City Clerk's office for once again putting together this public meeting through this new process here. I think it's important to acknowledge the men and women who are behind the scenes keeping city government going. In this particular case, an important facet of city government, our City Clerk's office. So I think it's time to thank them, all of them. They've been coming to work, they've been doing their job, and they're doing an excellent job. So I want to personally thank them. I think it's important to acknowledge that. With that, why don't we start from the, what I'd like to do is let's enter into the record. What I'd like to do is, I think just one item. Oh, also, I think City Solicitor Cheverini is present too, and Internal Auditor Costa is present, and Treasurer Lombardi is present. Yes, Mr. Clerk, did you say something? Okay, so I think there's only one item, so what I'd like to do is a motion take item number 1 up.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Madam Clerk?
Discussion relative to the year 2020-21 budget.
Thank you. And let's enter into the record. If we could, I have several exhibits, and we're going to start from the top, and then I'd ask for the appropriate motion. So we have an exhibit that looked identified as Exhibit B3. It's entitled 101-301, Commissioner of Public Safety. It's a approximately 4-page report, 3-box report, which talks about the expenditures and revenues of that department and their proposed budget request. Can we have a motion to enter that exhibit item B3 by Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor? All discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion unanimously. Next, we have another item entered into the record is B4, and we're identifying for the record it's 101-907, entitled Emergency Management and Homeland Security. This is also maybe a 7-page document. It's a multi-page document, has organizational chart, 3-box reports, and a request for revenue and expenditures. And entering the record is B4. Do I have a motion for that as exhibit?
Second.
By Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Clerk. Next, we have another item we're going to identify for the record as Exhibit B5. It's entitled 101-304, Communications. It's a multi-page document, 3-page report with the organizational chart and et cetera, in which the Communication Department is identifying their revenues and expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year. Motion to enter that as an Exhibit B5.
Second.
By Vice Chair, by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Clerk. Next, we have another exhibit entitled B6. Identifies B6 for the record. It's entitled 101-303, Fire Department. It's a multi-page document again. It has items ranging from the organizational chart to their 3-box report and stating revenue and expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year. Enter that accordingly as a B6 exhibit.
Moved.
By Vice Chair. Councilman Taylor, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously, Madam Clerk. Next, we have the last item at this time to enter into the record is identified as Exhibit B7 to item 1, of course, for the budget discussions, and it's identified as 101-302 Police Department. It's a multi-page document, starting off with, of course, organizational chart and several pages, 3-box reports identifying revenue and expenditures for the Police Department's request for the upcoming fiscal year. Enter as Exhibit B7 by Vice Chairman Councilman Taylor. Discussion. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously, Madam Clerk. So, why don't we take it from the top? I think we have, why don't we go, I think the first, actually, the police department, so where's that one? Well, hold on, why don't we just go into order, because it looks like, we'll do that. I'm gonna go in order of the exhibits, so it makes it cleaner. I think the first exhibit is B3, which is is the Commissioner of Public Safety's, department. Who from the administration, I believe the Commissioner's here, I presume, right? See, Commissioner Parry, he's here, so we'll, I
Present.
guess we'll start the process. So, Mr. Parry, will you be, testifying, and Mr. Mancini on this report, sir?
Mr. Chairman, good evening. Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer for the City of Providence. As is past practice and best practice, the Finance Department will do the budget overview and the narrative, and then we will go through the three-box report and any questions that pertain to the department, including budget or operations. The Commissioner is available for discussion. And Mr. Chairman, with that said, do we wish to take our oath of office?
Yep, exactly. What I'd like to do is, all the individuals who will be testifying, I believe Mr. Mancini will be, the Commissioner will be, the Police Chief will be, I think Sarah Silveria, Crystal Lindberg, is it Clara DeCerbo? Is it Carol? Unmute Carol, I think, is she testifying, I presume?
Yes, Carolyn will be testifying, as will Elaine Richards.
Commissioner, who else?
Elaine Richards, my deputy.
Oh, Elaine Richards, yep, on the top. So why don't we swear them all in to the, for the record, Mr. Clerk?
Could you all please raise your right hand and swear, do you swear on the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Yes, I do.
And could you just please
Say your name.
say your names and your title just immediately before the first time that you speak?
Start from the top, Mr. Mancini, if you know.
Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer.
Stephen Parry, Commissioner of Public Safety.
Colonel?
Sarah Silveria,
Hugh
Finance
Clements, Chief of Police.
Ms. Richards?
Elaine Richards, Deputy Commissioner of Public Safety.
Ms. Lindberg?
Director. Krista Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director.
Mr. Serbo?
Claire DeCerbo, Providence Emergency Management Agency Director.
And Carol?
Carolyn Bourbeau, Director of Telecommunications.
Thank you. And I think we have everybody, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you all. All right, so Mr. Mancini, why don't you take, stop from, everybody reference B3 of the Commissioner of Public Safety, three-box report. Mr. Mancini, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and if you like, I'll go through the narrative for the Office of the Commissioner of Public Safety. This is a revenue-generating department. The revenue that's in this department is revenue associated with the VIN inspections. And for the budget 21, that amount has been budgeted at $165,000, which is a slight increase over the prior year budget of $164,000. As to expenditures, regarding the category of salaries for fiscal 21, salaries have been budgeted at $764,000, which is a decrease of $2,343 from the prior year budget of $766,827. Benefits for FY21 are $436,444, an increase of $42,314 over the prior year budget. As to services for FY21 total $779,519, and that represents an increase of $107,395 over the prior year budget. This increase is primarily due, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, to software contract increases across all of the public safety divisions. As to the category of supplies for FY21 have been budgeted at $39,647. This represents an increase of $18,397 over the prior year budget. This increase is for computer equipment across all divisions, and there are no capital expenses in this particular department or division. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move from the narrative to the three-box report, if I may.
1 second, Mr. Mancini. For all the committee members, Vice Chair mention that there's an option on your, I guess you have a toolbar in which if you can press, it's like a hand showing that you're putting your hand up to ask a question. As committee members, do you see that? And Vice Chair, maybe you can help guide us?
Sure, when you click participants on the bottom of your screen, a list of all panelists and attendees will appear. You can mute yourself from that bar on the right-hand side, or you can raise your hand, which I tried to do the other day. But I do think it's helpful to identify that you would like to be recognized by the chair. Does everybody see that?
So let's see if we can, if folks, the committee members can, if you see it, try it, and then also wave your hand if I miss you. So we're trying our best here, okay? And it looks like we're disconnected this time. Can you folks hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
We can hear you, but we can't see you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so we're disconnected. All right, so we're going to keep rolling. So, Mr. Mancini, can you now begin your narrative on the Commissioner of Public Safety's office, please, sir?
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman, I just did complete the narrative, which is an overview of the three-box report by category. At this time, I'd like to go into the actual three-box report. So, starting on what's called page 26 at the bottom of the sheet. It's the first sheet. It deals with revenues. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, once again, for the benefit of not only committee members, but for other participants, including other members of the council, the three-box report has earned its name because the box that appears to the left is a comparison of the current budget, FY20, to the budget that's currently under consideration by this committee for FY21. The center box compares the current budget, FY20, to where we believe that budget will project out to the end of the year. And then finally, the box to the left compare the 21 budget to this year's projection. And that's meant to measure any budget risk or budget change that may be identified between next year and where we can do. Okay, so with that said.
Mr. Mancini, why don't you,
Yep.
just very quickly, when you look at that, it just has like one item, departmental revenue. Could you please break down what that revenue is?
Well, it does. On the narrative, it indicates that revenue is from VIN inspections. And if you go to the three-box report, this report here, you'll see that the account code is 43100 VIN verification. All of this revenue in the commissioner's budget is from VIN inspection,
So,
the actual vehicle inspections.
So we're projecting that, what kind of VIN inspections are these conducted, Commissioner? He's muted. Is he muted?
Okay, yeah, I was muted. I wasn't quick enough on the draw here. So we provide a service for vehicles that are purchased and need a VIN verification. It's been a process in place for a couple decades where it prevents stolen vehicles from being re-registered and re-stamped and then sold as a legitimate vehicle. So we have two civilians that process this VIN verification, and as a result of that, there's a fee that's collected that's reflected pretty much year over year, hasn't gone up all that much. That's where the revenue is generated from.
So let me ask you, how much?
You cut out. I didn't hear your question.
Mr. Chairman, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Commissioner, can you hear me?
I can now.
So when we look at this, right, we budgeted $164,000. It's projected that you're gonna do $178,000 worth of VIN. How much is it? Is it $20 per vehicle? What is, tell me the breakdown. How many vehicles is it and what's it cost per vehicle?
I don't know what we charge, but it's all statutorily what we charge. I know we tried kicking it up. Elaine will have the exact price.
Ms. Richards, do you know how much we charge? She's muted. Unmute yourself, Ms. Richards.
I am. One moment. So we are at $15 each inspection.
So it's $15? Okay.
$15.
So that's about, let's say about 12,000 inspections, is that what it is?
Yes.
Are they usually dealer, are these like used car dealer type of inspection or average citizen inspections?
Average.
Yeah, I mean, both. We have some dealers that run cars over and just your average transaction. So if you buy from out of state, you have to get a VIN verification in your state. And what that means is you look at the VIN and you authenticate as much as you can that it hasn't been restamped, and you run that VIN against the database to ensure that they're not restamped or stolen vehicles.
So this is purely voluntary, like someone who's doing it, or is it mandatory for them to do it?
It's mandatory under various conditions that you have to get a VIN verification. Okay. Each municipality provides a service, and the state was also providing that service.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Mancini, you want to go on to the expense side, you said?
Yes, 1 second, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, with that said, then we looked at the revenue. The revenue has been budgeted at $1,000 higher. If I could direct your attention to the center box, which reflects the budget for 20 versus the revenue projected for 20, we do believe that we will be at or better than budget on revenue, and those numbers have been fairly accurate throughout the year. So we don't see any revenue diminishment in this division, and I shared that with the committee. If there are no questions on the revenue, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go to what's marked as page 27 at the bottom, the second page in this set. And this is the page that covers expenditures. And so if we could begin again on the left-hand side, that particular box, which compares the current budget to the future budget, you'll see that there is a slight change in salaries. At this point, we're evidencing a small increase, $3,893 of salaries. Small change in the combination of overtime and callback, approximately $1,400 change between those two items. And there was a reduction in longevity in that particular item. All salaries in total for that line, for that category, has a reduction of $2,343. Benefits by its various components will increase by $42,314. The most significant increase is associated with medical insurance, affiliated with that particular category. As we move down to the operational expenses, there is a change in the budget of $106,000 at the maintenance and service line. We have provided in our narrative that change is associated with additional acquisition of IT equipment associated with public safety and many of the divisions within public safety. It's recorded in that particular item. The rest of that category of supplies and services shows a small increase in the so-called travel and training line of $400. And then down below, we're looking at computer equipment, an increase of $19,297. And that change is recorded in the narrative as a change in equipment across all divisions of public safety. That particularly rounds out page 27, Mr. Chairman, and then I believe the rest is just a summary of those categories. So that compares the 21 budget to the FY20 budget. If I could direct your attention to the center box, we can discuss the current position of the Commissioner's Office budget. Right now, we're projecting that salaries will be slightly above budget at $2,790 for the year. We will see a decrease in the overtime callback category by about $1,180, a slight increase in longevity. The net sum total for that category of salaries for the year might produce an amount over budget by $3,224. That could shift depending upon how those numbers are calculated by the time the year is over. With respect to medical and other benefits, we're projecting a savings of around $10,000, much of that associated with FICA and other categories of expense in the benefit category. We're also seeing that there may be a savings in maintenance and service for this year of $17,850. And then as we move to the end of the page, we're seeing various categories of savings associated with stationery savings there. And then I believe we see that kind of rounds it out. So overall, Mr. Chairman, we expect that this department will be at a balanced budget by the time the year closes out. That completes the presentation of the Commissioner's budget, and I will take any questions from the committee.
Committee questions?
Not a
Okay, a couple questions. The first one, the software increase of $107,000. What software is that?
So I will defer to either Ms. Richards or Commissioner Parry.
So there are two pieces of software. One, it's an analytical piece of software for the police department. So we can push various analytical data to the police officers. The other software is a piece that connects to our CAD for both the police and fire, taking data and pushing it out to either firefighters or police officers arriving at destination. So it's just taking advantage of some of the technologies and data to be pushed out to police and fire.
Is that an upgrade of what we have now, or we don't have that right now?
Yeah, we do not have that right now. It is an upgrade.
Okay. And also, Mr. Chair, I questioned the commission. Go ahead.
I'm acknowledging you for the record.
Okay. I'm questioning the commissioner's salary as being incorrect, as the Salary Review Commission recommended the salary, which was last year, $125,878. Last year, as you remember, the Finance Committee addressed this, and the commissioner's salary was put back to that figure that the Salary Review Commission gave that position. And I don't believe anything has changed since last year, to my knowledge, as the Salary Review Commission has not met over this issue for him or for that position or any other director that falls under the Salary Review Commission. And additionally, I would also like to add that the current sitting city council has not met to approve the commissioner's position per the charter, as the mayor would not send him up to be confirmed.
Okay. So, Mr. Mancini, how do you account, because what is presently the commissioner's salary per the comp and classification ordinance of the present ordinance right now? What is the salary, sir?
I believe the current salary per the compensation ordinance is $125,878.
So are you seeking to increase the commissioner's salary in this proposed budget, sir?
Yes.
All right. And it looks like it wasn't accounted for in the salary bar, right?
It was.
It was?
Yes, it was. The total of the various positions within the budget, with an attrition of only 30,000, total $729,891. That's the dollar amount that appears, Mr. Chairman, on the three-box report at salaries total and in the narrative. And those are the salaries that appear in what's known as the personnel supplement.
So, Mr. Mancini, when I'm looking at the budget salary line, which is 510, 50010, it says 725998, right? I'm just using that, right? And then the proposal 729,891.
That is correct.
So where do you account for, I don't know, it's roughly like $30,000, where's that?
So,
'Cause
last year there
75
was only attrition of 5,000. This year the attrition is 30,000. So that $25,000 difference makes up some of that difference, and there were some reductions. And once again, based on our discussion last evening, we took a placeholder position that there may be changes that may be agreed upon forthcoming in either delay in cost of living increase to members of the bargaining unit, and perhaps we would visit the possibility of furlough days.
I'm just saying, because I don't see but shouldn't the proposed 21 salary be higher than 729,891? Because the difference between 125 and 164 is roughly, what? $29? $29,000, $28,000?
Yeah,
40,000.
Mr. Chairman, there's an entire change in that salary structure. There's a higher attrition of 25,000, so that reduces it. And then, as I mentioned, there's an approximate 2-point-something% reduction if you take into account what's meant to be a placeholder for the time being associated with continued discussions with the bargaining unit on possible austerity measures.
So let me ask this question, Mr. Mancini, actually, Mr. Commissioner. So presently now in the organizational chart, you have a vacant chief clerk and a vacant deputy director of fiscal operations. Are those two positions still vacant, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And those two positions, Mr. Mancini, were they funded in the present fiscal year?
Yes, they were.
And are they still being funded for the upcoming fiscal budget?
Yes.
Okay, so, Gina, you're probably gonna have to help us navigate through that, because I'm trying to understand how that all plays out. I don't know how the 30,000 was buried, so you're gonna kind of get into that. Gina, you there?
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, can you put it more in layman's terms to explain to me how where's the $30,000 buried in the budget?
Well, we
So,
are at
Mr.
a
Chairman,
disadvantage because we do not have the personnel supplement. If we had the personnel supplement, you would see that they added up all the total positions and that they did a negative of 30,000, and that's what they're calling the attrition. So that's where that number netted out.
Madam Auditor, when do you normally get that document? What's the document you just described? What did you call it?
The personnel supplement.
When do you normally get the personnel supplement?
It usually comes when we get the bounded budget books, but we got them differently this year, so I did reach out today, and I was waiting for an answer today.
Okay, so Mr. Mancini, and I guess Ms. Silveria, when are we going to get that important document?
Mr. Chairman, we have worked steadfastly on compiling all the budget documents. I believe it will be released this week, hopefully tomorrow.
Okay, so I just want to say that next up will be the treasurer wants to have I'll acknowledge the treasurer, but my concern is that type of information has to be done, should have been done at least last week or the week before. And that document should have been already released and submitted to our committee. When that happens, the administration further puts back the council's ability to vet the budget. I'm sure it's not by design, but it does create a problem in which then we get further behind on our review of the budget. And this information is important to receive at the beginning of this conversation. But I want to have the treasurer, then Mr. Mancini. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, and just going back in history. Presently, as you know, the commissioner is under the Salary Review Commission. Presently, the Salary Review Commission has not increased the salary, so there is no ability for the council to raise it. And just for the record, there was a position that was taken last year that no non-confirmed directors went up in salary, so it had to be confirmed first. I also want to remind you that not only was the commissioner not confirmed this time. He was also not confirmed last time. So under this administration, even, there's no confirmation. And as you know, there's an ordinance out there that requires it.
Thank you. Mr. Mancini, Mr. Mancini?
Mr. Chairman, I was responding to your inquiry regarding the personnel supplement, and you're absolutely correct. It is not intentional. And if I may say for the record, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your indulgence for the moment, the finance team of 4 individuals have worked steadfastly to assemble documents for each and every one of the meetings called thus far. But you have to permit us the opportunity to brief departments prior to coming before this committee. Many of them have not had interaction with the finance department on their budget, at least not preparation, since the COVID-19. So it has put an additional layer of time-sensitive burden to the finance staff. And while we would probably have given this item some more immediate attention, we felt that it was more appropriate to get our budget documents ready for presentation, not only last evening, this evening, and tomorrow evening, and if you so choose, Mr. Chairman, any other night that you have ready for this week. But it has been because of remote participation, but because of the workload associated with briefing and presenting multi-divisional departments in succession over a short period of time. So with that said, I'll take responsibility and make sure that that document is furnished to the internal auditor and the treasurer as soon as possible. But it was not intentional. We meant no slight. We asked for your indulgence, and as to the hectic pace of assembling documents ready for revision. And quite frankly, we need that appropriate thinking time to make sure that there are not errors and that we're not presenting documents that need to be properly vetted before the committee. So, Mr. Chairman, with that said, please accept my apology if anything was omitted.
Yeah, I want to just acknowledge that I just hope that I know what will happen in like a week or so from now. I hope that the administration shows the deference to the council, because I'm sure that's when the administration potentially will be saying that the council's holding up the budget and financially jeopardizing the city. And then we start hearing that traditional ringing of the bell in order for the council not to do its job. So I want to make sure the public knows and the record knows that in order to do the job properly that we all would like to do, that it behooves both branches to cooperate in both branches to provide the information in a timely fashion. So I want to go on to the next thing. I just looked at, I want to double check, when you look at the compensation orders, Mr. Mancini, just another anomaly. I noticed in the org chart, I guess it is that you're looking to pay the commissioner $164,519.88, but yet in the compensation, it's up to $167,810.27. So it looks like it's even higher in the compensation ordinance. So I asked the internal auditor to work this issue out with the finance director and the CFO to address this issue. I'm going to go on to the next thing. I want to ask about the Labor's International Pension, Mr. Mancini.
Yep.
So my question is the City of Providence paying a higher contribution across the board for the Labor's International Pension this fiscal year?
No, it is not. Can I just give me 1 second to pull my docket here? So,
well, let's talk about what was budgeted. You had budgeted $27,300. Says you're paying $26,425. So first, let me ask why for this present fiscal year are we paying less into the Labor's International Pension?
So after the budget was basically vetted and prepared, we're learning that there may be a reduction effective in the next plan year based upon the better performance of the Labor's International Union's pension plan. And I'm waiting for that forthcoming information to come from Labor's International, either out of Washington or from the local, that basically demonstrates what that reduction will be. It may mean that we're not required to submit the next increase that was scheduled over a 10-year period because of the better results of that pension plan. The amount that was there was put as a placeholder based upon the amount that was known to us at the time of budget preparation. So if there is that change, and that change can be recognized as a savings, that savings will filter through the budget, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Mancini, so in your proposed budget, you're looking to increase it though from 27.3 to 31.8, is that correct?
That was the planned and scheduled increase in accordance with the existing agreement. That's correct.
Mr. Mancini.
But because of the
I know.
because of the performance of that plan.
Okay, my question right now, in the present budget before us, the present documents, what is the total throughout the entire city of the increase to Labor's International Pension? How much more money were we planning on? Forget about, right now, put aside on whether or not we don't have to do it. What, in this present budget, across the entire budget, how much more money were we planning on putting into that budget?
I believe it equates to a 10% per year change.
So that would be how much? How much money?
I don't have the entire schedule for the entire city because it's not assembled in a format for this presentation. It's assembled by department. But if you permit me the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, we'll get that to the internal auditor.
So I'd like you to get is I also need you to show it's the matrix that has been provided that shows what the city has to pay each year for the Labor's International Pension and how it matriculates up. And also, in this present fiscal budget, this budget you're proposing, how much did you add as an increase? Like, what is it? Is another $1 million to it? Another $500,000 to it? Because I am aware of that the Labor's International Pension System has overperformed and done really well, in which the city, actually not just our city, but all cities and towns through the nation, will not have to pay that additional increase because of their performance. So that means there's an additional money that would have to be then taken out of this budget or utilized in a different fashion. So will you be able to provide that for tomorrow, that information?
I believe I can.
Madam Internal Auditor, can you make sure that that happens, and then you can report on it to the committee tomorrow night? Tomorrow night we have a meeting, right?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. All right. And, Mr. Commissioner, can you, in your callback, you budgeted $4,000 in your budget, but then it looks like you're projected to overspend it, almost double it. Can you just explain to me what that, who gets the callback? Is this in the, when I think about your department, is the callback just for the folks in your organizational chart, just this portion here? Is this what the callback is, these people here?
Yes, those people that fall under the commissioners. So there's about 6 or 7, and that callback or overtime is required from time to time for the completion of various tasks that fall under the Commissioner of Public Safety. So there's a bunch of folks for payroll and processing bills and things of that nature. And from time to time, in order to complete those tasks in a timely manner, they're required to stay over or work an extra day on the weekend. That's where the overtime is derived from.
I'm asking callback. I didn't go to overtime yet. I'm talking about callback.
Right. That's the
callback is up. Overtime, right? Overtime is down. Right? Do you get paid more money for overtime versus callback, or vice versa?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's the same, but I'll ask Elaine since she manages those folks directly.
Ms. Richards?
It is the same amount.
Same amount? Okay. And the next question, do you have the breakdown of who received the callback and overtime out of it looks like, I presume the people who can avail themselves of the commissioner? I presume it's Ms. Fratello, Ms. Richards, Diorio, Murphy, Barrows, and Gonzalez, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, you don't get that. You don't get overtime or callback, right? Okay.
No.
The next question I have is, presently right now, Commissioner, out of your unit right now, can you tell me, we have 2 vacant positions already, so let's check that other box. The people there, can you tell me, I guess, who is in, who is working, who's teleworking, who is getting paid but not working? And we have different scenarios in the city. Who's at home getting paid but not working, or at home getting paid and teleworking? Can you tell me in your laundry list of who, I guess start from your 2 administrative assistants?
Sure. So the, the number of employees, so that we got 2 vacancies. And out of the number of employees, I guess including Elaine and I, it's probably 8 or 9. And all but 2, off the top of my head, are not coming in and not working. All the others are working from home and coming in as needed. Elaine, am I accurate in that number?
Can you tell me which ones are home, not working and paid full-time? Mr. Richards or Mr. Commissioner, can you tell me which ones?
Yeah, sure.
Specifically?
So the only 2 that are not coming in is the investigative clerk and the chief clerk.
And the chief clerk?
Yes.
Okay, and those 2 are not coming in, but still getting paid, but not doing any work at this time, correct?
That is correct.
Now, the other folks, from you folks, tell me how you are doing your job. Did you get an assigned computer? Do you have, what happened? Tell me what's happening. Are you coming in the office every day, or are you working at home? And then tell me, how are you working at home? Like, how are you doing your job?
So
You and I guess everybody.
Let me begin. I've been in every day. I am set up to work remotely for the weekends and long before COVID. So I'm able to jump on calls and work from home 24/7. But every day throughout this crisis that we're in, I've been coming into the office. And the same for my deputy, Elaine Richards. She also is able to work from home. I encourage her to work from home rather than come in, because the less...
No, Commissioner, I'm not a professional. What I'm trying to find out is, how is she doing her job? Were you given a mobile phone, a computer set up so you can go into the city system, Ms. Richards? I'm trying to understand if you have the ability. What did they do and say, okay, go home? What did you do? Like, did they give you a computer? Did they say, hey, make a couple of phone calls? Tell me how you're doing that. And we're trying to understand how people are teleworking.
So
can you tell me, from your point of view, Ms. Richards, how did they set you up? Like, for example, I know some institutions allow their employees literally to take their computers home and set up at their house, right? Their computer on their desk, take it home, they set up, and they just did a link to the mainframe of that company's business. Are you able to do that?
Yes, I am. I already had that ability.
Right. So are you using your computer or a city computer?
I am right now using my own computer.
I mean, do they issue you a city computer at least, or no?
Not presently, no. I have a city phone, though.
Now, can you take me now to the other folks? The administrative assistant, were they issued a city computer or access to the city computer system mainframe system?
Yes. They were,
Okay. Are they?
So we have 1, 2, 3 individuals, 4 individuals that were issued city computers.
Which ones are those, please?
That's the IT person, the administrative assistant, the public information officer, and the senior fiscal officer. And I opted not to take one so that I could have one of my staff have one.
So the senior fiscal officer, are they working from home?
Yes.
And they have access to the city's mainframe to do their job?
Yes.
How are they doing that job? Did they get a city computer, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And then also, is that also for the senior fiscal officer too?
Yes.
Did they issued a city computer?
Mm-hmm. Both of my
And they've
senior
got-
fiscal offices have computers. Mm-hmm.
And then how about your and you said your public information officer also has a city computer?
Yes.
And what about is there a grants administrator, you said, it looks like?
No, that's kind of me.
Okay. And what about, is the grants administrator working home? Or,
I do that job also.
okay, oh, okay, so I'll give that to you. What about MIS director? Were they given a city computer?
Yes, he already has one. Mm-hmm.
All right, and they're using access. Next question is, how are you handling how are you handling the public calling in, Commissioner? When the public calls the Commissioner's office, how does it go? Can you tell me how that process works?
Take myself. So my administrative assistant either comes in a couple days a week or works from home, and those calls are forwarded to her if they're calling my office. I've been in more often, and so I also pick up the phone when it rings and people are looking for me.
So, Commissioner, you've been able to use this new technology called forwarding. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Mancini? Mr. Mancini, are you there, sir? Are you, Ms. Severia? Could you have the other department heads coordinate with the Commissioner, and maybe he can help them instruct this new technology called call forwarding, so that the administrative assistants could actually be working and actually do something? Could you work on that project, Ms. Severia?
Absolutely.
Commissioner, would you be helpful to help the other city departments learn about that newfangled technology?
Always.
All right. Commissioner, I commend you for doing it. That's the point. Okay? That's a good thing. That shows that it can be done, and it is being done, and you're being productive. That's a positive thing. Okay?
Thank you.
So that's a good thing. So that's why we're having this conversation. If we can keep on rolling on this. Oh, Commissioner, are you keeping tabs of the COVID-19 expenses?
I am.
The Commission.
I'm sorry, you had a follow-up question?
The COVID-19 expenses, are you and the Commissioner's office keeping tabs for your office as well as the fire department and police and et cetera?
Yes.
How is that happening?
So we're managing all COVID-19 related expenses. And so, both tagging with accounts and whether it's overtime or equipment, that we're tracking that as we acquire or incur expenses. So Elaine really has been instrumental in managing both the police and fire and communication to ensure that each week we know what the expenses are as it relates to public safety.
Thank you. Ms. Richards, so you're maintaining that laundry list of COVID-19 expenses?
I'm coordinating it, yes.
Okay. Is that just for the public safety or for the entire city of Providence?
No, I am only doing public safety.
Okay. Can you please provide the latest updated list to the internal auditor by tomorrow, please?
I will get that to her.
And can you give us examples of different COVID-19 expenses that the city would be able to utilize or be able to get reimbursed on?
Yes,
The
so
Commissioner just mentioned some. You just mentioned some overtime, Commissioner, I guess, callbacks. You said equipment. So can you just delve in a little more of that?
So yes, we have overtime for both police and fire. Pretty much overtime on the fire side. It has been pretty much backfill for any firefighter that has been placed in quarantine. On the police side, it would be mainly for pot closures, license enforcement, to do with the mayor's executive order for the closure of the businesses and checking on whether they were actually complying with it. And the rest was for expenses for direct PPE purchases, for hand sanitizer, for gowns, for wipes, for face masks, and the N95 masks, and items like that.
Thank you. If you can provide that update list and keep the internal auditor updated on that. So I presume some of the present budget right now will get reimbursed, present fiscal year will get reimbursed by the federal government for this COVID-19?
Yes, I assume
That
so. So what happens is, the operations and chief operating officer through PEMA is, submitting that through Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency through the Public Assistance Grant through the state. So we are not handling that directly through my office. That is going through, PEMA for the direct reimbursement.
And we can also acquire equipment, it sounds like, right? For COVID-19 related equipment?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Messina, did you have anything else you want to say? I don't know if you were not there, but I hope I talked to Ms. Severa, for you to coordinate with your department heads, talk to the commissioner, to learn about the newfangled technology called call forwarding. Could you have that, commissioner's willing to help your department heads to learn that process?
I'm looking forward to that, Mr. Chairman. I think it also comes along with call waiting, so I'll be happy to do that.
Call waiting? Thank you, sir.
Yep.
And Treasurer, do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Chair. Go ahead, Jim.
do you want to go first?
Mr. Treasurer, then Internal Auditor.
Okay, thank you.
Who's going? Treasurer, then Internal.
So I believe, just to clarify this, I believe overtime and callback is paid at the same rate, but callback requires a certain number of hours to be paid. That's my understanding of it. So I believe it's 4. So if you do get callback, it's a minimum of 4 hours of overtime.
That is correct.
And I know that you just mentioned about callback or overtime. I assume no non-union people get that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I know you just mentioned, are you still using the Marriott for that, for the police officers who are sick?
I'll take this, Elaine.
Yeah.
We've used the Marriott for 2 firefighters. One that was pending a test and came back negative and left the Marriott a week and a half or so ago. We have one member that is positive into his or her 4th or 5th day at the Marriott, and he'll be the last member in which the Marriott will host. We're in the process of identifying and using another facility.
Okay, because I know that the governor came out the day after with probably 50 facilities that were lower than that emergency bid that was awarded. If you want me to send you the link, I will.
I already have it. They do not take COVID positive first responders.
Okay.
Internal Auditor?
Good evening. Couple of questions, and I don't know, this may be towards finance because you create this 3-box report. I have a question about 2 line items. The maintenance and service line item, I just ran a report today, and to date, they only have 529,000 expended and another 30,000 in encumbrances, which doesn't come to the 647. That's one. The second one is.
Well, Madam Auditor, why don't we start one step at a time? Mr. Mancini, Ms. Severa, can you please explain this anomaly?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to either Ms. Richards or Mr. Silveria to give that information.
Finance Director, I think you are muted, or do you have it muted here?
All right. I'm going to defer to the department here. I believe there are some projects that they're putting payments through shortly.
Okay. Then Ms.
But
Richards?
they're not even in.
Gentlemen, hang on. The hot potato has been deferred to the department. Ms. Richards, do you have the answer? Can you unmute yourself?
Yep. So could you repeat that?
Madam Auditor, could you please repeat the question?
If you look in the projection for the fiscal year 20 in the middle, in the center 3-box report,
Yeah.
they have a projection of 647,000 for maintenance and servicing. I am showing that you have only spent 529 and have encumbered 30, and it's like 100,000 less than budget right now. So either you haven't purchased everything that you budgeted, or it's just misleading.
There are additional items that have not come through yet for this fiscal year. They're still pending, so there are a couple of awards that are coming forward. One is coming through on the next board meeting. I hope to have it through. One is for Kronos, or our telestaff system. We had to rebid it per the Finance Committee recommendations, and that has not appeared yet on the board.
So Kronos, and that is for fiscal year 20?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain the computer line item? I have 0 spent, 0 obligated. Yet over here, it's being stated that it's all going to be spent, or 15,000 will be spent.
That, right now, we are in a holding pattern. We do have licenses that need to be procured for this fiscal year. We have submitted it. I have not received approval to spend it as of yet.
Who is it submitted to?
The purchasing director.
And this is essential equipment that is definitely needed?
This is licensing, yes, that are at end of year, at end of life.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out to the committee that that's not quite where they are here, but it is their projection, so I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Ms. Richards, are you saying that there's about $100,000 still pending of future spending that you have? Is the Cronus thing about $100,000, that what you're saying?
I can't submit to that yet, Mr. Chairman, only because it has not gone before the Board of Contracts and it is not public.
Okay. And then let me go to the next question. So let's talk about that. Now it looks like you're looking to increase the budget by another $125,000 for the upcoming fiscal year. Could you explain?
For the maintenance, yes.
Maintenance service, another you're looking to increase that budget for the upcoming fiscal year, $125,000?
Yes, as the commissioner already spoke about that. That was for the two systems. One was to enhance the CAD system, and one was for the crime analytics software for the police department.
So what do you plan on spending the other $647,000 on?
That is for numerous maintenance software, as we have had in the past years, for all our other departments.
So is the software a constant purchase, a yearly purchase?
Yes, it's constant maintenance agreements every year. Mm-hmm.
You can just put together those repetitive, I guess, expenditures and the contracts that reference them, and throw them to the internal auditor, please?
No problem.
And I presume that we talked about $650,000.
Yes, the main one is for the police and fire dispatch. That alone is almost $400,000.
Thank you. Treasurer, you have a question, sir? Treasurer? No?
Stepped away.
I don't know.
He may have stepped away.
Okay. You want to unmute him? Does it matter?
He can unmute himself, so he might have muted himself.
Oh, okay. All right, well, we'll keep rolling. All right. Let's move on. Any comments or questions on that portion right now? I guess we'll come back. Oh, Vice Chair Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to draw your attention to the org chart. And I'm looking at grants administration, which appears to be a department. It's not listed in the comp and class ordinance, and then a public information officer. So could I have an explanation as to what those positions are
Are
about.
they on the comp and class first? I guess that's the first question, right?
Yeah, I can't seem to find it in the comp and class. They're not listed under public safety.
So the PIO position is funded and falls under the police department, but we use her, it's a female, for our PIO and public safety. And I didn't hear the other position that you mentioned.
Grants administration.
Grants administration. Elaine, what position is that? Is that the one you're doing?
Yeah, it's not technically a position. You just categorize it as grants administration.
Right, so right now, so Elaine came with the city 5 years ago or so as our budget person. And Michael O'Toole was our grants administrator that was here before I. And when he left the city 3 years ago, maybe 4 now, Elaine was put in his position, took on those responsibilities. And we created a deputy commissioner for the purpose of a title with Michael O'Toole when he was here. And that continues where Elaine serves in that position. The budget position that is vacant is one of 2 that I spoke of. We will need to fill for obvious reasons. The PIO, I've explained to you where the funding is under the police department, but remains a service under the umbrella of public safety.
So if it's being paid out of the police budget, it should show up on their org chart. And the grants administration, if it's a business function that falls within the responsibility of the deputy commissioner, I would think that they would be together. It's just seeing them dangling. I'm looking for positions and salaries and the like in your comp and class. So I find that, strange, odd.
Yeah.
I think you should clarify it. You should put the PIO officer in the police budget if that's where they're getting paid. Or the police org chart.
But she works under the public safety umbrella.
Well, shouldn't she be in your budget then?
Say it again.
Shouldn't she be reflected in your budget then if she works for you?
I did, and it got moved back several years ago for varying reasons. So I understand it's peculiar, but practically that's how it works and that's how it's been funded.
For clarity, if someone is being paid out of a budget, they should show up in their org chart.
Understood.
All right. Anyone comes to question that one? We'll roll to the next department. I'd ask all the participants to stay on the line because Melinda probably potentially maybe have more questions of Ms. Richards and Ms. Severa. The last couple of meetings, people dropped off the line. The hearing wasn't over. So, Mr. Mancini, do you want to go? Let's go to the next one, which I guess would be Exhibit B4, which is the Emergency Management Homeland Security Budget.
Yes, give me 1 second, Mr. Chairman.
Is that individual on the line?
Yes, Director Disturbio is on the line.
All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if you would direct your attention to Department 101-907. This department does generate a degree of revenue. Much of that is based upon the annual submission of a grant to the Rhode Island Emergency Management, and that grant is generally received, but this year there's an expectation of an increase of $26,800 of revenue in that category. As to expenditures, salaries for FY20 are $429,000, and that's an increase of $97,691 over the FY20 budget of $331,659. I should point out, Mr. Chairman, to yourself and members of the committee and council that this budget is requesting 2 additional positions known as planning coordinator and response coordinator that they be created. And these positions are being funded in response to the COVID-19 and federal reimbursement is expected. Director Disturbio can speak to that with greater detail, but at her request and the request of the administration, after some thoughtful consideration, Given what's going on in COVID-19, and Director DeSerbo will elaborate further, they were included in this year's budget. Benefits for FY21 are $195,000, representing an increase of $6,924 over the prior year. Services for the department are submitted at $117,189, a decrease of $20,000 over the last year budget. And this budget does include the cost of EMAP accreditation, which will not be due again until FY25. That represents the major shift downward in the budget based on the savings of that accreditation expense. And supplies for this year are budgeted at $24,865, an increase of $1,600 over the prior year budget. Savings are in the communication equipment and stationery lines where there is an increase in supply, while there is an increase in supplies. There is no capital associated with this budget, and I'm willing to take questions at this time before I go into the 3-box report, which I have before me.
Any questions? Let Mr. Mancini continue. All right, Mr. Mancini, continue, sir.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, with the 3-box report, directing your attention to the revenue page, page 40, as it's named at the bottom. Basically expecting revenue in the following categories. We expect that there'll be a state grant, miscellaneous state grant of $4,000, and miscellaneous revenue associated with some community rental of the space associated, I believe, at the Charles Street location. While that was expected to be more expansive last year, I think because of the COVID-19 conditions and because of aspects of that isolation and social distancing, we may not see that revenue or that demand for that space. And then finally, under the civil defense reimbursement, as it's known, but it's also known as the Rhode Island Emergency Management Grant, we're expecting a $225,000 grant based on information that's been shared by the state to the local agency, and that represents a $25,000 increase over last year. If I could direct your attention to the center box in those following categories, we will see what we believe to be close to $192,000 of the anticipated $200,000. And while it's never guaranteed or never assured that reimbursement will be received, there's at least at this time of the year, there's always that expectation that while submitting for that grant and asking for that reimbursement, there's always that expectation that we will get it. So this year, of the $200,000 that was budgeted, we've already expecting to see $191,000, and that's the basis of why the next year is budgeted at $225,000. If there are no further questions on revenue, I'll move to expenditures.
Yes, please do.
As the narrative pointed out, on the expenditure line, there's an increase in salaries totaling $100,550. The vast majority of that, $97,000, is associated with the creation of 2 positions, one known as a planning coordinator, one known as a response coordinator. These positions were created in response to the COVID-19 conditions and will provide valuable guidance as we move from COVID-19 back to what appears to be the beginning of the various stages of returning to safe practices affiliated with return to work and return to social exchange. So Director DeSerbo, I know, is available, can discuss that in greater detail once I can complete my review of the financial information. We don't expect a major change in overtime. In fact, I think we'll see a small change downward. And overtime is only generally associated with seasonal activity associated with winter or snow operations when that occurs, and any of the public events that occur, including, for example, PBD Fest or 4th of July. Both of those, we believe, will have a reduction given the postponement and or cancellation. And so that budget was held steady probably at this time without knowing what overtime could look like in a snow event going forward next year. There is no longevity at this department at this time. Moving forward on benefits has a slight increase of $6,924. And then from there, we also have operational expenses. Moving down on page 41, the biggest change in that category is maintenance and service, totaling $3,093. There are some reductions in other expenses. And then if we could turn to page 42, continuing with the left left side box, we do see a reduction in the expense for miscellaneous of $22,943. The largest reason for that reduction is because of the EMAP accreditation no longer needed until FY25. That accreditation has been gained and will be in effect until fiscal year 25. Rounding out the remainder of the budget categories, there are various reductions and or increases. The net total of those on the supplies will total an increase of around $1,600, and that represents a change in the supplies to restock the emergency management headquarters. With that said, Mr. Chairman, can you move to the center box to review this year's projections versus this year's budget? It appears that there will be salaries will come in at or below budget. This time we're projecting a $7,000 reduction in the budget. We project that overtime will be reduced by $5,000. To my earlier comments, that overtime budget is reserved for those winter storm events that require an overtime situation. The PVD Fest as an example, as well as the 4th of July. So this year, we do not believe that there'll be a need for that expense associated with the postponement and or cancellation of PVD Fest as we know it, as well as the 4th of July ceremony. So we think there'll be a fairly modest savings in that amount, about $5,000. Longevity will hold firm. Moving forward to benefits, again, focusing on the center column, center box, benefits should come in at or below budget. And then as we move through the supply and operational expense categories, likewise, we see budget balance and or savings and reductions. It is our expectation that by the time the budget year closes out, this department will be below budget or at or below budget. So with that said, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm happy to take questions or happy to have Director DeSerbo answer any questions associated with budget or operations.
First of all, Mr. Mancini, just to check, I want to double check something with you. When you go to the Commission of Public Safety's budget, I noticed that the City of Providence pension expense, it looks like what you're proposing is it to be pension contribution almost over 12. That's from 213,000 to 201. Can you explain why the city's pension, why the Commissioner of Public Safety's office position that their pension expenses would actually go down by almost $12,000?
So, Mr. Chairman, at the time of the budget preparation, there were some actuarial confirmation information that was provided, and it may have caused us to skew some of the numbers across the budget. They are under review, and they will be certainly referred back to this committee. And if there are any changes that are necessary by division, by department, before any final budget is adopted, we will work off the most recent information that assigns the actuarial information, which has not changed, but how we assign it by departments based on the size of the department. So that may have changed for any number of reasons, but I'm aware of that, and we will commit to having a revised pension allocation amongst all the departments.
Okay. And then the other question is, I noticed that some of the numbers in your 3-box report is not the same numbers in this budget book that the council has, that there's different numbers in different categories, different locations. Labor's International Pension has different numbers in the budget book versus your 3-box reports. So I think you're going to have to eventually figure out how to reconcile what is what, and then what exactly is going to be in the final budget documents. So I want to get that cleaned up. Now I'm going to go to the next thing on this one, is that on the emergency management, homeland security budget. In this particular case, what's going up is, of course, the pension contribution. And this one, the pension contribution goes up. Goes up like 16. Almost $24,000. In this case, it goes up, the pension contribution.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, once again, while the pension number is a number that is prepared by actuary and is known to us under our amortization schedule, that number has been properly identified. It's just in the allocation by departments with some shifting of personnel. We realize that, and we will prepare the revised allocation.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask the question for the director here, Mr. Serbo. Presently, right now, what you're looking for is, first of all, you have a vacant deputy director of emergency management position. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Is that still vacant?
We are in the process of a hiring process right now.
Okay. How long has that been vacant?
That has been vacant since the end of February.
Okay, so that was that your old position?
Yes, sir, that was my former position.
So that's on that one. So now let's talk about these two new positions that you want. I know you're putting COVID-19. What do you mean by that specifically?
These are both temporary.
Sorry, go ahead.
These are both temporary positions that would support the continued elevated response posture as we continue the response to this prolongated pandemic.
So you said temporary. So explain to me, what do you mean by temporary?
So these would be positions that we are requesting to be filled in a approximately 1-year capacity to assist us in continuing this response due to their temporary nature needed to respond to the current pandemic. They would also be reimbursable under the public assistance grant.
Okay. So basically they're 100% reimbursable at this time?
75%, sir.
So would they end up being participating in the city's pension system? City would have to pay for the pension, the health care, and that stuff, correct?
Yes.
So what's the total cost of this position? $49,915. So it's 75% of the $49,000. Is that correct, Director DeSerbo?
Yes, sir. The city is responsible for 25%, and it is reimbursable for 75%.
But 25% of the $49,915, not part of the. Do they reimburse health care and pension and that stuff too? Is that part of it? It does? Okay. So, Mr. Mancini, when this COVID-19, you're getting this money. Can you use this money for anything, or just strictly just for these positions?
I would have the director speak, but it's my understanding that they would be specifically.
I was actually asking the director. I'm
By all
looking at
means.
her, so I'm asking you, since you're looking for these positions, right? So can you tell me, can you answer that question?
Yes, absolutely, sir. So the positions would have slightly different responsibilities in their capacity in response to the COVID-19. The planning coordinator would support the proactive and operational planning, including situation reports, information management, incident action plans, as well as adapting and adding to current existing plans with COVID-19 precautions.
Is anybody doing that work now?
Yes, sir.
Who's doing that now?
I am, sir.
Okay. And let me ask, why don't you tell me what the other planning coordinator will do? We've got two, that's the other person going to do. Same thing?
No, sir. The response coordinator would be responsible for assisting the elevated response posture, including assisting the Emergency Operations Center activities, including web EOC management, as well as the response activities.
Is your department part of advising the mayor on his different types of executive order actions?
I am one of the members of the EAB committee, yes, sir.
Who else on that committee? What's this called? The EA, what's it called? Emergency what?
The EAB, Emergency Advisory Board. It is a group. There are a number of senior executive department directors.
Okay. So you're the board that's advising the mayor on his executive orders and how he's proceeding and how he's acting in the city of Providence this time?
There is a group of department directors on the Emergency Advisory Board that composes that team.
Right. Do they keep minutes?
No, sir.
Okay. Is it open to the public?
No, sir.
Okay. So let me go back to your vacant positions. The concern I have is I like the idea that you're currently saying they're temp. So then I want to make sure that Mr. Mancini,
Yes, sir.
since the city was picking up 25% of the cost of these two positions, we want to make sure that they specifically, we don't want, what usually traditionally happens is that when the money runs out, then everybody says, oh, we have to take care of that person, and then the city it gets stuck with two more positions that they don't need anymore, nor do they get any more federal funded. So instead of creating two exactly city positions, isn't it just cleaner for her just to hire two, independent contractors who can do this job, so we don't have to get caught up in city employment, we don't have to get city pension, and all that other healthcare issue. It's simply a private contractor who will work for her, and which she can get reimbursed a portion of it for COVID-19. And then I know next year, because we're going to have this conversation, that the federal money will dry up, and then you'll be all telling us why we still need to have these great positions and all that, et cetera. So can we convert these positions to independent contractors versus making them permanent city employees?
Well, Mr. Chairman, and
by the way, independent contractors do the same thing you're looking for. So it's not like they can't do the job. It's just that the city won't have to own them when the money dries up.
So, Mr. Chairman, while I understand your concern, I don't know if there are federal prohibition against hiring an independent contractor.
Actually, there's not, Mr. Mancini.
Okay, but do you allow me?
It'd be part of the COVID-19 expense, because just like you're hiring different independent contractors to perform COVID-19 expenses. So it'd be the same thing.
What I was about to say, Mr. Chairman, if I may, what I was about to say, while I don't know that difference, sir, but we'll get that answer, what I do know is that any position that we have ever put in the budget in the past 5 years or more that has no certainty as to continuation of funding, when that position goes in, it is clearly marked limited, expired at X date. When that happens, that responsibility is no longer part of the city. It's marked in the compensation ordinance, marked in the personnel supplement, and it's supported by compensation and documentation in the budget. It will say limited, expired at X date. That's it. And therefore, there will be no claim by anybody in that position, and nor will we ask for that job to be continued if the funding doesn't exist. I personally believe that hiring the employee has greater accountability, in my humble opinion, but I will defer to those who have sought advice on whether or not employees versus subcontractor. I think in these critical operations, it's important to have it as an employee on call at any hour of the day.
I appreciate that. Also, duly noted about that clause in the ordinances. I'm the one that actually wrote it, so I know exactly what it says and what it does.
Well,
we participated but I have Councilman Taylor, and then Councilman Taylor.
Yes, my question would be, since the COVID-19 started, are the three people, I guess there's three people working under you, the administrative assistant, the preparedness coordinator, and the recovery coordinator, are they working at Pima? Are they working remotely? They're not working at all?
They are working remotely, sir.
All three of them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the other two, there's nobody in those vacant spots right now, or there is somebody?
There's nobody in those positions currently, sir.
Okay, so they've been remotely since day one, the other three?
The other three have been remote for the past month. When the city moved to have individuals that could work remotely, I sent my team to work remotely as well.
Okay, so explain to me, I guess, what the recovery coordinator and the preparedness coordinator would be doing from home.
Absolutely. So our preparedness coordinator during normal operations is also responsible for managing our volunteer program, as well as exercises and trainings to lead the preparedness efforts for the city. During our current activation, she is also functioning as the lead organizer for all of our volunteer management and coordination right now. So she has been leading the coordination and deployment of the 200 new volunteers that have signed up with Pima since the COVID-19 response began, as well as the other 300 prior existing Pima volunteers. They have to date performed over 380 hours of volunteer work in various capacities around the city.
That's the preparedness. What's the recovery? Oh, that's both.
Recovery is working with myself and operations to attend all of the required trainings held currently by Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, as well as assisting in the tracking of recovery costs associated with the public assistance grant.
Okay, and I also know you mentioned about the EAB committee. Does the city council have a seat on that EAB?
Not at this time.
Do you know why?
The EAB has been in existence for many, many years as a policy guidance group, and that has been an establishment as the Mayor's Advisory Committee since Dana's tenure as director.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. I'm all set. Thank you, Chairman.
Vice Chair, Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we have job descriptions for the response coordinator and the planning coordinator? I don't see them in my packet.
If they're not, Madam Leader, then I think they should have been there, but I'm sure Director DeServo, working with HR or Finance, can get them to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Vice Chair? Madam Director, have you already posted those two positions?
No, sir.
So I would, before you begin that process, I think you need to figure out how we're going to work this out. I appreciate Mr. Mancini's advocacy for city employees, but independent contractors always work just as well. In fact, if that wasn't the case, then half the work that the city gets done wouldn't get done without independent contractors. So I find that they're just as accountable as a city employee, and sometimes even greater accountability. But if that's the main reason why, accountability is the reason why, that we should get caught up in that, hiring more employees versus just doing independent contractors. So I hold off on that. I strongly suggest that you hold off on those positions until we work on that piece.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just say so, that not always is there available and qualified help who choose to act as a subcontractor. The work that this is going to require may be specialty to a person who prefers to be an employee, even if that employment is marked as limited. They would prefer not to worry about withholding of taxes, paying of expenses. They prefer to report to work under a competent director in a qualified environment to provide that service. And I think the pool of candidates may be wider than seeking a subcontractor who may be involved in larger and more diverse projects. So with due respect, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what you've told me. I think you and I came to that conclusion a while ago. Positions will be marked limited with an expiration date. Will not be funded without the funding.
I recognize that.
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair?
Thank you, sir. I agree with you on these two positions. I do think an independent contractor structure is more appropriate. Obviously, they are temporary, intended to be temporary, primarily funded through the federal dollars. I think we've addressed accountability, and I think there's a lot of people that aren't employed that would welcome the opportunity to work for the City of Providence, even in an independent contractor structure. But what the independent contractor structure does for us is it doesn't add on to our benefits package of costs. So, you know, I think we can accomplish what we want. We're trying to accomplish with an independent contractor. But I am interested in looking at the job description so that we understand completely what these positions are actually going to be doing. Thank you.
Madam Director, you have that job description already created?
We can supply that to you very shortly.
Can you please provide it by tomorrow morning, please, to internal auditor, so she can get it to the committee members?
I can work with Elaine and HR on that.
Okay.
Do they already exist, or are you creating them?
Vice Chair? Question, Vice Chair?
Sorry, I spoke without being recognized.
Vice
Do
Chair?
positions descriptions already exist, or are you creating them now?
Madam Director, did you hear the question? Did you hear the
Yes,
question?
sir. Yes, sir.
Do you
We
have
are
an
in the
answer, please?
process of developing them.
Okay, so they don't exist, the descriptions are not crafted, and that's probably why they were not included in our package. So I would like to see them as soon as you can get them to us. Thank you.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so so definitely you need to get that sooner or later. I guess now you can fill in some more blanks in order to figure out your case. Mr. Mancini, did you have your hand up, sir?
I did,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, only to follow to Madam Leader's question about the cost of hiring an employee would include the cost of benefits, and I agree, it does include benefits, but if I'm not mistaken, the submission of reimbursement to the federal government would incorporate both salary and attendant benefits that the city would have to cover. So I do think that while that may be an issue in some instances, I think it would be included in the reimbursement. So with that, we will review the situation, report back to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini.
Madam Director, I have a question. You have rent. Can you tell me, what's the rent for? What building are you renting?
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if the director is fully familiar with that, but we have, for a long period of time, assigned a rental value to the building at Charles Street location, and that rental expense is shown as a rental income on the city's public property department's books in its income section, and it had been for a longer period of time used as a means to try to include that as a percentage of overhead associated with any federal grants that may be submitted by PEMA.
Does it get included and reimbursed by the federal government, Madam Director?
It would if the grant.
Mr. Mancini, somebody?
It would if the grant permitted it, yes.
Okay, that's a big question mark, and then I'll have Councilman Espinal. Can you answer that question, Madam Director? Do you know anything about this?
Yes, it would depend, as Mr. Mancini said, it would depend on the type of grant and what is eligible for reimbursement under a particular grant.
Okay, so has it been? In other words, let's talk about the present fiscal year. Was it eligible to be paid off? So the answer was no, right? But yet you still had them pay $46,000 out of their budget, correct?
No, sir. No, sir. May I have the opportunity to explain?
Yes, please.
It's put there as a placeholder. It's put there as a placeholder with an offsetting entry on the public property budget so that they balance out and it's budget neutral, but it's meant to, in the event that an opportunity presents itself during the course of the fiscal year, because of the activity that occurs regularly at PEMA, that would be used as a means by which overhead could be assigned if permitted. If it's not allowed, or if it doesn't occur, then there is no loss to the city because the offsetting income is offset by this expense.
Was it permitted this fiscal year?
Not to my knowledge, but again, no impact to the city.
I understand why. How about last year?
I don't have last year's numbers before me, Mr. Chairman, but hold on a second.
Has there been any year that we were able to offset?
There was a year in the recent
Last
past.
5
I
years?
just don't know. I just don't recall when. But
You're looking for Councilman Espinal? Councilman Espinal had a question?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the director of PEMA, she said that 75% of the salary will actually be covered, will be reimbursed. Now, what about the benefits? What percentage of reimbursement would that be? Is that 75%? Is that less, or is it 100%?
To the best of my, yes, Mr. Mancini.
No, I would say that any reimbursement, Councilman, is reimbursed at the same percentage for all eligible expenses, including the salary and the fringe benefits.
Thank you.
So let me make sure we get it clarified. So Mr. Mancini, let's say that person salary is $49,000, but with benefits, let's pretend it's $100,000. Just make it simple. Okay? Make it $75,000. Is it, then you submit to the COVID-19 that we're paying them $75,000 salary plus benefits and et cetera, and then we get 75% of that $75,000.
So on a $75,000 salary and benefit package, and those benefits were, salary was 50, and the benefits were 25, we would be expected to absorb $18,750 of expense. But I must say to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee and council members, on a $106 medical budget and on a nearly $106 million medical budget and $90 million pension payment, I do not believe that for a 1 or 2 year period, that the exposure of that non-reimbursement would significantly disturb those budgets, both in preparation, construction, execution, and spending. That's my considered opinion.
I don't think, council members, I don't think they're greatly concerned about the 18. I think they're greatly concerned that the city will have to inherit 2 new positions in the
Absolutely
future.
not. Absolutely not, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we have had a legal opinion on this.
I know that. Listen, I recognize the clause is in there, but I've seen it time and time again in the school budget where we put the clause in, and then the school department comes in, rolls out another new title, and the city has to absorb another 6-figure job. So just hang on. I think Vice Chair Ryan has a question. Vice Chair?
Following up on the reference.
The internal auditor.
Following up on the reference to limiting the salary for the period of the year. I'm not seeing that in the Compton class. I don't know what you're referencing. So I'm not seeing it, first of all. But my other question is relative to the COVID-19 federal funding. Have we received guidance as to what will be reimbursable relative to employees? Is benefits an acceptable reimbursable expense? Have we received guidance? Do we have rules on those funds at this point? Because I haven't seen anything.
So
Mancini?
I will subsequently defer to both Ms. Richards and Mr. Servo, but typically under all federal reimbursement, not distinguishable by the occurrence of an event, in this case COVID-19, salaries are normally accompanied by benefits, including the benefits that are extended by that particular community. I want to be clear about this, Mr. Chairman, and your committee. Under no condition, under 0 condition, will these positions be permitted to continue without funding that has been assured or awarded. They will be listed as limited with a funding expiration date. That is clear to me, and it'll be clear to this committee, as has been past practice in other similar occurrences of federally funded or other non-local funding positions. And while you have cited the school department, and I'm not familiar with their technique, if that's the case, that's not a technique that is practiced on the city side of the budget. So I want to be clear about that. As to whether or not guidance has been provided, I think the guidance is clear.
I think you said you said you're going to defer to them too, so we still would like to hear from them. So, Director, did you receive any guidance from the federal government on COVID-19, Director?
Yes, sir.
What is it, written guidance or verbal?
It is both, and it is also, I will note, rapidly developing as this pandemic evolves. We have received some initial guidance pertaining to some expenditures, and we are anticipating additional guidance as we go forward.
So please forward what guidance you do have today to the committee and to the internal auditor by tomorrow morning. Ms. Richards, do you have any understanding, any guidance from the federal government on COVID-19?
I will defer to the director. She has been directly involved with Reamer on that.
All right, and then I think I had the internal auditor and the treasurer had a question. Internal auditor?
Hi. Yes, just for clarification, the civil defense reimbursement is still the state, the federal reimbursement through the state for the salaries and the benefits of your active employees. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I am afraid of the $25,000 increase because I'm not sure if that includes those 2 salaries that are already getting a 75% federal government So are we double counting those two positions with that civil defense reimbursement? And also, before you answer that, I'm sorry, at one time, that was the rental of the land and buildings was covered under that civil defense reimbursement. It hasn't been covered for at least 7 years that I know of.
Thank you.
So
So Deputy Director, are you double counting it? And if you're not, please explain why.
We absolutely cannot double count it.
I know you can't, but are you? I know you can't, but
No.
are you? All right. And
No.
tell us how you're not doing that.
So the EMPG, which is the Emergency Management Performance Grant, is 50% match for current existing employees. That is where that number is from, the current, 5 positions when we are fully staffed.
Okay. Treasurer?
Sure.
No question?
Mr. Chairman, just going back in time, if you remember, I'm going to say 12 or more years ago is when you put the sunset clause in, which would require any federally or non-local source funding to come back to the council to get funded, and saved the taxpayers a lot of money by doing that. But I mean, I don't know during Mr. Mancini's term, but I have seen people come back and explain, as you mentioned, a number of times, oh, these positions are absolutely necessary, et cetera, and we end up owning them. So I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I know Mr. Mancini, I take him at his word that they would not go on, but, Mr. Mancini may not be here, next term or whatever else it is. So I think the safest way is to do what you were mentioning.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mancini? I give you another minute, then we're going to keep rolling.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, long live the city of Providence, and I hope that we are all here for some time, and I mean that sincerely. To the treasurer's point, I fully support any sunset clause, any position that from its onset we know is limited in duration, limited in funding. I'm not aware of any position that came back before the council where we requested that we extend or have that position incorporated permanently into the budget, unless there was a time when that position either had a vital service or generated some revenue, but I do not recall that. If it was limited as it was presented, it remained limited and funding expired, the position expired. In fact, I think you may recall, Chairman and Mr. Treasurer, it's the Finance Department who is generally critical of that activity to the degree that we impose that restriction ourselves. And I appreciate the fact that the Treasurer has mentioned the sunset clause. I have no objection to that. If such a clause, by our own words, we're saying so, limited with duration expiration.
Thank you. Director, on 53,500 miscellaneous expenses, can you just define what those are? Looks like you spent about, I guess you're projecting to spend a little bit more than your budget. Can you tell us what that's about, what expenses they are?
Which one is that, Mr. Chairman?
53,500, 53,500? Well, I presume she would know since she's spending it. Director, do you know what you're spending that money on?
Mr. Chairman, which discrepancy are you looking at?
53,500 miscellaneous expenses. That's the account number.
Yes, sir.
So can you tell us what you spend that money on?
The difference between the 44,203 and 40,222 for projected.
What are you spending the $40,000 on? What are you buying?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Chairman, I gave testimony earlier that this year that included close to $20,000 in expenditures for the certification. That will not occur in FY21. So if you're looking at expenditures that we projected, including that $44,000, nearly half of that is for the accreditation that's good through FY '25.
Ms. Director, is any of these expenses reimbursable by the federal government?
No, sir, not in that category.
None of them, okay. So, in the list of the categories that in your budget, Madam, can you tell us which categories are potentially eligible for reimbursement of federal dollars, and which categories have been or will be reimbursed by federal dollars?
The only categories that would be eligible for reimbursement under the current COVID-19 public assistance grant would be for equipment or services directly related to preparing for, mitigating, and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. I will make note in particular that the majority of these supplies have been purchased or are categorized under public safety, public property, operations, DPW. The majority of these expenditures are not directed from FEMA.
So, can you also buy software and computers and that kind of technology in response to the COVID-19?
Currently, the IT department has been providing the technology support necessary for our current response.
And that's reimbursable?
It may be reimbursable to a degree. We are currently investigating that.
All right, so when will your investigation be completed?
I don't have a date in front of me right now, sir, but I can keep you informed as information becomes available.
Okay, great, all right. Internal Audit, did you have any more questions on this one at this time?
Just one question.
Internal Audit?
The state grant for $4,000, why doesn't that go through the grant activities rather than the general fund?
Sure.
Let me answer that, Mr. Servo. So, Gina, I think that's a reclassification that's coming our way. I think that's just, it doesn't belong in that area. It probably belongs, maybe Sarah can answer that better than me. I'm sorry. I was looking at somewhere else. The state grant probably is distinguishable from the civil defense reimbursement. Sarah, do you have that? Or Clara?
Yes, I can speak to that briefly, or Elaine can as well. There are a variety of different grants that we are eligible to apply for, including the, for example, Security and Homeland Defense. We're eligible for a variety of different things. That is how we apply for funding to support our community emergency response team, among other operational support.
I can further add to that. So the controller's office chooses to do it, to record it that way. It's a one-time grant annually, and I've asked them about that, and that's how they chose to record it.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Majority Leader, you have the chair.
I'm sorry?
You have the chair for a moment, if you'd like.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was not paying attention. The chairman has stepped away from the chair. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying? Mr. Clerk, has the chairman stepped away from the chair?
Sorry. He's back, sorry.
Thank you.
I'm back, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, any other questions concerning this at this time? So we'll continue on, and then ask all the participants to stay on the line, because I'm sure we maybe some additional questions for you. I just everybody understand, when I've asked you for the department heads, those are called deliverables, and it's a time frame for the next morning or the next day to get the internal audit up. Clerk, writing down that list. Mr. Clerk, are you doing that, the deliverables? And so it's important that stuff gets submitted as we move forward in order for the budget process to move smoothly. Importantly, as we get closer to budget time, crunch time, when the committee is still looking for that information that has been asked of these department heads, and I, of course, direct Mr. Mancini, of course, the department heads on the line, that if you choose not to submit your information, then there will be, whatever the consequences will occur because of that. So it's important that you provide that information to the internal auditor and to the committee so we know our questions are being answered. So it behooves you to make sure that process moves smoothly. So let's move on, I guess, to the next one. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I just have a minute of your time, please, sir? We are endeavoring with strict diligence to assemble as many answers to as many questions as possible, while we're also trying to prepare departments so they give proper testimony and accurate testimony as they should, but they need review. And I must say, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, while we're all concerned about getting these matters vetted as immediate as possible, sometimes the pace of human work is just not practical. It's just not clear thinking. I apologize for that, but I'll speak for my department and the other departments. So if you'll be mindful of that, we are endeavoring not to delay, but to deliver. Appreciate your time.
As long as we're mindful of that when, like I said, when the administration starts going on the PR campaign and starts trying to use that as a tactic against the council and trying to speed up the process. So let's move on to the next one. I think we'll go to the police department if we could. I think it's B7, and I believe the colonel's here, and I know the commissioner's here, but to start with that. So can we go to B7 for the police department? You want to start, Mr. Mancini, with the report on B7?
Thank you very much. So, the police department, as it's known as Department 101-302, there is revenue in this department, Mr. Chairman. That revenue is budgeted for this year at an amount of $7,762,430. This represents a decrease of $433,232 over the prior year budget. The revenue in this department is generated primarily from red light camera and school zone traffic tickets. The projected budget includes a reduction to school zone traffic revenue due to the uncertainty around COVID-19 and potential for remote learning next year. So that is an issue that we've addressed not only as we close out the current year, Mr. Chairman, but we believe that there'll be some reflection of that, at least in the opening days of the school year, perhaps going forward in the next budget. As to expenditures, salaries for the FY21 budget have been budgeted at $41,727,651, representing an increase of $660,443 over the FY20 budget. Benefits for the FY21 is budgeted at $37,653,694, an increase of $682,866, once again over the prior FY20 budget. Services in this department have been budgeted at $6,722,433, representing an increase of $943,367 over the prior year budget. The increases are primarily due to costs associated with the new police school academy, and which is scheduled to begin in early spring of 2021, and the costs associated with the continuation of the contracts with the moving violations. Supplies in FY21 have been budgeted at $1,903,000, an increase of $294,428, and these increases are mainly due to the additional body-worn cameras for the police school. There is no capital expenditures in this presentation for this budget. If there are no questions, Mr. Chairman, I could continue. I would continue with revenue in the police department. That appears on page 29 of the three-box report. Revenue for this department, as I move to the left box, comparing the current budget 20 to the proposed 21, the major categories of revenue differentiation are, as you see before you, the largest change is school zone traffic camera. We expect to see a decrease of $762,000 based on the prior year. Prior year was budgeted at $3.5 million. We expect to see a decrease. We have been reporting in our most recent operating report for the month of March that was due in April, and the cash flow report that we fully expect to see a diminished revenue for the remainder of the school year, therefore the remainder of the fiscal year. And without the degree of certainty, we don't know how that will occur as we move forward to the next school year, whether or not there'll be continued distance learning or some degree in combination thereof. So as a precautionary measure, we did take the position that we might see reduced revenue there. And it is based on some best estimates based on current protocol and current practices. In the red light camera area, we expecting to see some diminishment as well. 245,000 is the main reduction there. Overall, in the categories of revenue, Mr. Chairman, we think with some combination of increases, we're going to see, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The red light camera, we do believe will be increased by 245,000. And that's because the red light camera will be increasing the red light camera locations. The commissioner will speak to that at his appropriate moment. And so we do think that the net change in revenue will be approximately $594,832 decrease over last year's budget. If you move to the center boxes to discuss this year's revenue as budgeted versus this year's revenue as projected, you'll see that particularly in the categories of, once again, school zone revenue as well as red light camera revenue, we are projecting reductions in both of those categories, already having been projected in our most recent operating report filed in April through the month of March, but with an eye towards the end of the year, based on two reasons. In the school zone category, because of the closure of school, we now know that those cameras, and we've had this matter researched by the law department, and the commissioner's office has done the same, and we know that those cameras cannot be used for any other purpose but for traffic enforcement and school safety surrounding school days. So there will be no revenue generated in that regard. With regards to red light camera and that ticketing, much if not some of that ticketing is devoted to those folks who pay those violations in person versus the mail. While we see a continuation of mail violations being paid through the mail, a fair amount, maybe more than a half of those violations tend to be paid with an appearance in municipal court. With the court closed, that revenue is also being hampered and delayed. So the biggest concern for the budget is appearing here in these revenue sources, and we have in fact projected that in our operating report issued in the month of April. As we flow through the rest of that report, there are minor changes that appear by category and some revenue makeup that will help soften some of the loss in the two main categories, but that's the presentation of revenue. I'm willing to take questions at this time or complete the police presentation by going into expenditures. I follow on page 30.
Why don't you go into the expenditures, then we can get into the Q&A, please.
Absolutely. So starting on page 30 to the left, we're comparing FY20 versus 21. I should say FY21 versus 20. We're projecting on the salary line a $437,000 increase of salaries for FY21 over FY20. The combination of that includes a multiple number of changes within the salary grid, including the addition of the police school, the 7th Police Academy, expecting to have 50 recruits with a cost that will probably extend to close to $800,000 increase over the 20 weeks of the 24 weeks that will occur in fiscal 21. There will also be changes associated with some diminished workforce. We'll see some mandatory departures that'll have some savings. There'll also be a budget provision. While we are in active negotiations under the FOP contract, Mr. Chairman, you might be aware that typically when a contract has expired and we're in negotiations, with respect to the dignity of the workforce and with respect to the process of continuing contract discussions, the city has been of the position that we always place minimally a 1% of the current salary as a placeholder. We have done that and made that provision. That's close to a $300,000 provision. That is included. And then there are some changes in both the civilian salaries as positions that were not filled due to either transfers, retirements, or departures, as well as the continuing discussion associated with the budget assumptions on whether or not there would be savings associated with a yet to be determined and yet agreement on either delay in the contract of wage increase and or any potential of furlough days. That combination has resulted in a net change upward of $437,000. And I'll be happy to go into that in greater detail with the Commissioner, Ms. Richards, when this is complete. In the area of overtime and callback, the net change year over year is an increase of $146,114. Overtime will continue due to some staffing shortages, naturally, and with the recruitment of the 70th Police Academy, we will not see relief in this fiscal year. That relief will not occur until they graduate. So sometime in FY22 is the earliest we will see the ability to retain or to attract, I should say, 50 new police officers. During the category of other salary conditions, salary line items, slight change of $19,000 downward. Longevity has an increase of $96,000. The grand total of all salary components change one year over the other, $660,000 change. Benefits has a grand total change of $682,000. Much of that associated with medical insurance. There will be some adjustments to the pension line associated with the recalibration and assignment of pension calculations. The number, as I had stated in my earlier testimony from the actuary, will not change. It is as stated. It's the manner in which it's been allocated by departments along the city's workforce. As we move down below the page to cover expenditures, largest change in expenditure is at fees not classified. And if you give me a second to just check my notes on that, I believe that the expenses associated with fees not classified, once again, is associated with the recruitment class and training facilities. The Commissioner and Ms. Richards can give greater detail in that area. And then rounding out that page is expense associated with printing. We see a reduction in the printing budget. And Mr. Chairman, if you like, I can stay with that page and move to the projections for the current year, as we are discussing that already. So with that, we move to the center box. Salaries are expected to show a reduction of about $127,000 for the year based upon what we're seeing at current rate. The callback and overtime has an increase of close to $125,000. They probably will be budget neutral by the time the year is finished, other than for the increase in expense associated with the other categories of police salaries and the savings that's associated with longevity. We think overall we'll be at budget or somewhere close to budget. Benefits, once again, is under the purview of the finance department and the various benefit providers, including healthcare. We don't think that we will exceed the budget on benefits. And as we move to expenses on that page, we think we'll be in budget balance basically for the categories associated with rubbish removal, promotional exams, fees not classified, and et cetera, those categories that appear on page 30. If there are no questions at this time, if I can continue with my presentation, page 31. Moving to the left box, budget 20 versus budget 21. Categories that appear before you are personnel recruitment. That expense will increase by $105,000. That's directly related to the recruitment of police academy recruits and attendees. No change in background check at this time. The training and tuition, the training budget is associated with the new recruits. Tuition, we expect that the tuition budget will be reduced by half. That we're seeing a similar pattern in the current budget that not as many police officers, perhaps the newer officers, are accessing or taking advantage of educational opportunities, and we're seeing some savings already in this budget. So we believe that in the new budget, that savings will be about $100,000. Repairs to equipment has an increase of $20,750. Moving downward, there's a savings on maintenance and service of $22,800. Bearing in mind, Mr. Chairman, that there will be a master lease that will provide for, I believe, 20 new vehicles, patrol cars, and 15 detective or unassigned or unmarked vehicles, or as the case may be, I think detective vehicles. Following down on the contractual services, there is a increase on the contractual services of $355,808. I believe that is due to, in part, I don't have my note with me, but I will defer to Ms. Richards on that detail. And likewise, you'll see expense increase for the speed zone camera. That's the portion of expense associated with additional expense to the vendor and additional expense associated with the set aside for the speed zone camera. 35% set aside is included in that allocation. Miscellaneous expenses will increase by 10,000, and that rounds out that page with a reduction in stationery of $1,625. As we move to page 32, in the left column, canine supplies will go down by 7,000. We'll see expense reduction in the equestrian unit professional care of 48,000. This represents the fact that during the current budget, there was an expense associated with improving and repairing the equestrian track. That expense has been completed or will be completed before the year is over, and there will be no need to budget for that. Also, guns and ammunition, there is an increase in that expense associated with the recruitment of new recruits, and therefore the assignment and assignment of ammunition to those recruits. Medical and chemical laboratory will see a decrease of 44,000, and the other categories associated with auto parts are shown as a decrease. There will be an increase in the uniform wearing apparel, again associated with the new class of recruits, and then miscellaneous materials and supplies, once again associated with housing the recruits during their training. This completes the review of the 20 versus 21 budget. Mr. Chairman, I was remiss, I did not stop at the middle columns to discuss the current year for the expenses associated on page 31 and 32, so I could do that for you at this time. We're moving to the middle boxes. We see categorically a decrease in expenses associated with personnel recruitment and background check. We believe that there'll be a reduction in tuition by around 49,000 or thereabouts, saving the budget in that category. No change in repairs to equipment. We think we'll be at budget. Maintenance and service, we should see a savings around 47,000. We believe there'll be some slight reduction in repairs to auto, and we do believe there'll be a slight increase in maintenance of vehicles. Overall, that category will see a reduction of expense totaling 37,000. Dropping down below, legal expenses are by contract. Court reporters, we believe there'll be a savings of 7,300 there. Contractual services, we believe we'll see a savings of 142,000 at this time. Red light camera fees, we expect to be at budget. And speed zone camera expense, we believe will have a savings of 176,000. Grand total savings in that category of contractual services, 319,000 projected. Miscellaneous expenses, modest change, an increase of $3,661. As I close out that page, stationery expense will be decreased by $4,771. Turning to page 32, center columns. Canine expense will be within budget with a savings of around $1,646. The equestrian account will be a reduction of $10,208, as will equestrian unit supplies, equestrian unit professional care, and guns and ammunition. All of those categories will see a reduction in expense. Medical chemical laboratories will have expense savings of $9,000. Once again, in all the following categories: auto parts, food, fuel, housekeeping, tires, all of those expenses net will see a decrease in expense, $7,729. The grand total of that category of $44,000 expense savings. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that the budget for the police department, including salaries, will have a net overspend of about $811,000 for the year. And that includes salaries and the line items that we had discussed in my presentation. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I will take any questions, or I will refer to the Commissioner or Ms. Richards.
Chief Taylor?
A couple questions. The med and chemical lab supplies, 44,000. Why is that a reduction of 45,000? I don't know if I missed that.
Ms. Richards, can you assist with that?
Yes, in this year here, we had equipment that we had purchased that we no longer require in next fiscal year.
Because you have enough equipment that was already bought, or that equipment's not needed in?
Yeah, so it was a one-time purchase.
Okay.
Through knock equipment.
Got it. Okay. My next question is concerning the red light and speed cameras. Obviously, I just heard that you're going to add more speed cameras, but my concern is that under revenue, we didn't really meet the revenue because obviously school's closed and whatever else. But I see on the expense side, that's going up on both of them. And that's been my concern all along with these red light cameras, that I feel that we're spending more than actually what we're bringing in on these issues. Because to see the expense on the speed zone camera, it's going up $342,000, and you're not expecting to bring in that amount of money on the revenue. We don't even know what's going to happen with the school zone cameras, even if we put more in.
So let me answer. We're talking two different programs. The red light program, we plan on increasing that by 5. And moving some around. So we expect a rate of revenue on the red light enforcement program. On the speed, you're right, we are not able to run those, thereby we are not increasing by 5 on the speed cameras until the school is back in session, and then we'll roll that out. We do make money on, although I've testified before and I'll continue to testify, it's not about making money. It's about changing driving behavior. So we've had the red light camera program in the city for over a decade, and we continuously move them around because we see the effect it has on driver behavior and the reduction of risk and crashes at those sites. So that program continues, although the revenue may have dipped in the last 6 weeks because of the impact that COVID had on the driving population. So that was expected. And as it relates to the speed camera fees that under the contract, we as a city continue to, are obligated. We are in discussion, a lot of problems in discussion. I know the treasurer has raised it in the internal auditor, looking at force majeure language to determine whether or not there are any escape clauses, if you will. And those discussions are ongoing. And so we have not paid at this point any of the fees, structured fees for the speed cameras in the last 6 weeks since the schools have been closed.
On the red light cameras, it says projected $400,000. So in 2 months, you're expecting to get on the red light cameras $400,000. 2 months left of this year, the fiscal year, I'm saying.
With the increase in the red light cameras and the revenue that's coming in. So we have May and June, yes, in 2 months. That's our projection.
And we're doing $200,000 a month on those, roughly?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay, and a couple other questions. Narcotics people, how many people do we have in the Narcotics Division?
Colonel, I'll defer to you with personnel and assignments.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow council. So presently we have 10, and we have 1 sergeant and 1 captain.
Are we down? Are we up? Are we even? Where are we? And as far as those, because the reason I'm saying this as a councilman, and I think all my colleagues can attest, every time we go and have community meetings, there's 2 top things. One is a lot of selling drugs in the neighborhood. Number 2 is speeding in the neighborhood. So, and I would say narcotics is probably the first. And I was just wondering, has that gone up or down? I always feel that I think that we need, I know we can't go into executive session on this, and I know Chief, myself, I've talked to you about this, and I don't want to say this on this meeting. But I think that we need more narcotics people, but I just like to hear how many people that we have.
So yes, we have
I have
spoken about this offline, Councilman, and we used to have a good number, a good percentage more than we do presently in narcotics and in every unit. With the attrition of the manpower, we've trimmed every single unit, traffic, the mounted command, narcotics. We used to have as many as 20 plus in narcotics. We're down to 10. They do all their search warrants, days and nights. They're doing this 10-man unit is averaging more search warrants. That's with arrests of individuals and narcotics. They're averaging more than when we had higher numbers of complement of people in that unit. So, you know, they're doing more with less. I know that's hard to do, but in fact they are.
And I'm not saying I believe they are, but I know that, like I said, I don't want to say this here, but I know I had a concern with you when we talked of the schedule, if you want to call it.
Right.
And it concerns me on that schedule of if I'm a drug dealer and I know that, then I'd be out there at a certain time. And I think that we need to up the narcotics people. My personal opinion, I would recommend to up that, to have more narcotics people, since the biggest problem that I see in the city, or always constantly here, one of the biggest is of drug dealings on and off, on the highway. My neighborhood, a lot of them's on and off, and we're not going to catch these people, unless we're lucky.
Understood, and I would agree. However, they don't just work their investigations during the day shift. They work overtime nights. They work social media. A lot of these drug dealers are using social media, and they set up their arrangements during the daytime, whether it be deliveries or shipments, and they communicate very well with the other units that do work the night shift, including the uniform division patrol officers and the violent crime task force. So there's a good dissemination of information, and oftentimes they call the information, and the drug arrest may be made by those in uniform, or oftentimes those in the violent crime task force as well. But I would agree. Once we run an academy and graduate an academy, we will boost every one of our smaller units, including traffic and narcotics.
And I guess I don't want you to talk about it here, but maybe you could send out an email to the council people that we discussed about the ATVs and motorcycles that are running rampant through the city. I'd like to see how many red light cameras and speed zone cameras they have violated, because it's not even summer yet, and the last few warm days they were all over the place. And I don't want to discuss your theories now, but I think the council, what you discussed with me, I think would be very helpful. Maybe to send an email out just to make it easy, so because you're not going to run into all the council people at one time. And we could go to executive session, but unfortunately we can't. So, and I don't want you to tell you what your plans are.
Well, quickly on that point, you'll be happy to hear that we've made some great headway in the last week and a half with the ATVs and scooters that are illegally operating in our city streets and neighborhoods. We have several ready to dismantle and crush that we've done in the past. I believe we have upwards over 50 ready to crush, and we have some really good investigations going on for others that are being operated in the city. But we've done well the last 10 days, I'd say.
Okay. And I guess my last point would be that I know that there was I think we discussed, maybe this actually question would be for the commissioner, that in Ward 8, there was a major drug bust, prostitution / whatever you want to call it. And I never saw any publicity or whatever you want to call it on it. No, when they had it in Kennedy Plaza, it was a big deal. It was all over the papers and the news. And I think it's very important that when the police do this work, I think they should be recognized, not only because of the job that they're doing with less people, but also to let the people know who live in my ward or who is in any other ward, let them know that the police are actually out there doing this work and have made these things and made these arrests. I mean, you know, how the justice system works. Some of the people are already out, but there was nothing said. Kennedy Plaza was a big thing. Ward 8 was a big thing because I heard about it on the streets, but it never came out, nothing publicly. And I don't think that's fair to the police department who spent all that amount of time doing those investigations and making those arrests. And I think it's important for the people to know what the police are doing in the ward. Because, I mean, I get all the time, well, they're not doing this, not doing that. And then I go and say, well, they did this. Well, I never read about it. I never saw it. Nothing, you know, and it was very quiet. So I'd like to know why that didn't come out publicly. And I know COVID kind of came in right along the same line also. But I just like to know why that wasn't made public.
So you directed at me. We don't hide anything from the media. All our arrests are public. And sometimes there's an interest by the media to publicize what we do. And other times we can't get any attention to those cases. There are other times that we don't want to publicize it for strategic reasons. And I do agree that it does have an effect when the media covers something and we try to communicate to the community and to those drug dealers or prostitutes that are on the street that we're on it and we're not going to tolerate that behavior. So I don't know why specifically in that sweep nothing was picked up. I just don't know. It could be the media just didn't pick it up. It could be we didn't want to publicize it for varying reasons. I'm
just saying, before when you did Kennedy Plaza, it wasn't picked up. It might not have been picked up by the media, but there was press releases put out by the administration, a press release about what was going on. And I don't know why a press release wasn't put out on this, and then the media would have picked it up.
I understand your point. Let me give you the flip side. We get criticized also for publicizing people that are low-level drug either users and dealers. So we get in a court 22. We don't want to put people that are addicted into the criminal justice system, but when we have constant complaints in a particular area of the city, the Providence Police needs to respond to that and to the community. So it's a balance for us in how we communicate, but we don't deliberately hold anything back from the media.
Okay, I'm like I said, Kennedy Plaza or any ward, I think are equal.
Understood.
And I think, like I said, it does a good point for the people to know, you know, like for those month or so, that's Cranston Street was nobody on it. And they don't know that you guys did a sting. I knew it, and I try to tell people, but they don't know. They go by, oh, I didn't see it in the news, I didn't read it. And I think it also sends a message, if you do put it out there, to the drug dealers, like, hey, you know what? The police are coming down on these things. They started at Kennedy Plaza, now they're in Ward 8, they're going in Ward whatever, but you know, that's, you know, it seems like we're catering to the drug dealers more than the constituents.
Well, I take offense to that because we don't cater to drug dealers.
I'm not saying catering. We're worried about putting in the paper someone who's violating the law.
I understood. I tried to explain that people that are addicted to various substances and they're low-level users and are a nuisance to our community, we're dealing with that also. And I'm not giving a pass to anyone. And we don't cater to drug dealers, first of all, or drug users, but obviously this country's had a problem with drugs for a long period of time. And we're not, and we haven't arrested our way out of it. And it's just a balance. It's tricky for us that I tried to explain to you in everything that we do, but nothing secret or private. Everything that we do in the Providence Police, when we arrest somebody, it's public record. I get your point, and we can push things out so we get the attention of the community, and I understand your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, Councilwoman Ryan, then President.
Yeah, thank you.
Monaco.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank my colleague for raising those very important concerns. All of our colleagues share them, and that is absolutely true. And I've had a number of conversations with the Colonel, but my concerns currently are speeding. Since the COVID situation, speeding on our streets, with less people on our streets, the speeding is become almost unbearable. Number of people who are walking in my neighborhood have expressed that they just feel very fearful when they're trying to cross the street because the cars are traveling at such great speeds. So I'm interested in knowing what is the plan for addressing the current speeding issues that I know are impacting all of our wards. Colonel?
So I'll address that. Yes, Councilwoman. So we've utilized some data on our side to address enforcement, traffic enforcement on the speeding issue. And we've utilized the complaints coming in from 311. And we've hit on all those spots that have been complained about on the 311 complaint site. As well, I spoke to you last week. We were ready to direct some enforcement efforts towards you right when they closed down the street for the walking loop. So we're intent on putting a speed sled up on Pleasant Valley Parkway and as well dedicating some traffic enforcement. It can't just be enforcement. It has to be public service notification. It has to be signage. These message board is always helpful, the speed sled, and then we follow that with enforcement. But yeah, we're fully intent on doing that location as well. We started on North Main. We seem to have a lot of complaints on North Main Street in 311.
So since the schools have been closed, I know we've got a number of speed cameras at school locations. Let's talk about Academy Avenue, for example. That camera is not functioning right now, and the speed on that street is significantly increased. So I guess in these school zone areas, what can we do? What tools do we have to provide some relief because the speeding is getting out of control?
Well, 1 second, Colonel, before you answer the question. I wanted the committee members, and also I know there's other two departments. It is getting late in the hour. So what I wanted to talk to the committee about is that we would finish discussing the police department, and then we would do a motion to stand at ease for this committee meeting and to reconvene tomorrow at 5. So to recess, so then we can pick up tomorrow for the fire and communications. Again, I know we're going to get a little more. We'll probably have some Q&A. I got some questions for the police department, and then instead of getting into 9:30, this way the people who are going to do communications, people who are going to do fire, they'll know they have to be tomorrow. So we'll make the appropriate motion of this committee once we're done with the police line of questioning to committee members. Okay? So, Colonel, I want to let the communications people know and the fire people know that that's how we're going to proceed. So we'll stand at ease and we'll pick them up tomorrow. Vice Chair, continue your question, and then of course, Colonel, please answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what can we do in the areas that we have regular school zone cameras that are not functioning now, and they've become speedways? Additionally, on the topic of ATV vehicles, those bikes are being spotted on those very areas that I'm referencing, typical school zones, as well as the new slow street initiative seem to be attracting a lot of these ATVs. So what can we do, Colonel?
So yes, Councilwoman, two things. So again, we can rotate the message boards, speed sleds that we have, and then follow that up, buttress that attack on the speeding with enforcement. And again, we can't do it nonstop 24/7 at all these locations. With less cars on the road, we've seen increased speeding all over the state. We speak with our colleagues, and Route 95 has become a NASCAR racetrack in speaking to the Rhode Island State Police. So to answer the first portion of that, we can dedicate the speed sleds and some traffic enforcement at those school locations or the thoroughfares where the, it's wide open now because there is no school. Number two, the ATVs, again, I can keep this as a separate line of communication and conversation. We've made some pretty good headway behind the scenes, and we know we have their attention. I can't speak too much at this meeting to that point, but we obviously follow through social media, many of these members, and we have absolutely made a dent in that operation. And we've seen since last weekend, over this weekend, we saw minimal use of ATVs. Not to say that we're wiping them out completely, but they know that we're paying special attention to it. We have their attention in Providence because they're mentioning that.
Quite a few in my ward this weekend, Colonel, so just
Mine also.
bringing that to your attention. I keep hearing it. I just wanted to follow up on slow streets. How's that working? Because I'm getting feedback that neighbors are concerned if an emergency vehicle has to traverse the area that is somehow cordoned off, it slows response, as well as how are people who are walking the streets or biking in the middle of the street going to get out of the way quick enough? Does it present a danger to the walkers and the bicyclists, as well as slowing down response time for our emergency vehicles? I say that particularly because I live on Pleasant Valley Parkway, as most people know, and that is one of the streets that was closed off, although that was retracted because there's ongoing construction. But it is a concern. It is a route where there's a hospital on. So has there been any thinking about that, or what are some of the discussions that you've had or concerns that you might share?
Yeah, so in the beginning, a lot of people had opportunities to weigh in. They picked 14 locations with the intent that as the program went on, they'd have the ability to reassess. And I think you've seen that after the first weekend, they reassessed on some of those locations. And I think that will continue. And I think the council members will have an opportunity to weigh in where they feel that it's not working at a particular location. You've seen already that some have been pulled back and abandoned.
I was not included in any council discussions. I didn't know. Was the council approached or engaged in discussions about the implementation of that plan? Are you aware of any engagement of the council?
I am not, no.
Okay. Yeah, that was news to me when that rolled out. Okay, and then I just wanted to ask, we spoke earlier of a public information officer that was on the org chart for the public safety department. But I understand that that position is paid for by your department. I would like to know what the duties of that person are, particularly since now one of my colleagues, my finance committee colleague, asked about communicating drug busts and the like. What does that public information officer do? What is their duties?
So that official pushes out information relative to public service information, originally from the police department. We have a high volume of activity in the police department in the form of activities, in the form of arrests, in the form of active investigations. And then in the effort of condensing workforce, I believe that most of her activity comes from the police department. However, she has now transitioned into all of public safety. There is information being put out for the fire department, for communications as well. I think the predominant activity on the PIO side is on the police side. However, she does work for all of public safety.
But she's in your salary? You pay her salary?
Correct.
Okay. Who does she report to?
Both myself, the commissioner, the command staff, we interface with her every single day, but eventually myself and the commissioner.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much, Colonel. Thank you for your answers and thank you for your hard work. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam President?
I'm all set, Mr. Chairman. The question that I had was covered during this questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. I just want to go back to the safe street thing. Commissioner, were you part of that programming?
I participated in discussions about that program, the Slow Street program, yes.
So when did those discussions begin for you?
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Do you know also who else participated in that program?
There were varying people from the administration. I wasn't on every discussion, but I pretty much represented the fire department. I don't know if any of the fire personnel participated, but I know the colonel or his designee also participated in some of those discussions.
So when they presented the streets, who was doing the presentation, what streets and what streets to close?
It was more people from planning that put together the strategy and identified, various streets throughout the city. So pretty much planned.
Are you aware of any notifications to the people that live on the streets that the streets are going to be closed?
I'm not aware if there were any, but I wasn't involved in how that was going to be communicated, but there was a discussion for about a week about pushing this out to our stakeholders in our community. So to what degree they did, I don't know.
So who is leading that so we can have a conversation with that person? Do you know who? So it was the planning department, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. I would just ask that in the future, Commissioner, and also is the FEMA director still on the line?
FEMA.
What do you call it? Emergency management? FEMA?
Director DeSerbo.
She's still on the line?
Yep, she's there.
Yes, sir.
I would ask both of you, when the administration is looking to do unilateral action like that in the city of Providence, you have a fiduciary obligation to inform the city council. As you know, Commissioner, you are actually, your position is actually supposed to be a creature of both the executive and legislative branch. And Ms. Serbo, you have a fiduciary obligation, especially with impacts. As for stakeholders in city government, I ask both of you I want to remind both of you that the city council is the legislative branch of government, the co-equal branch of government, and the reason why both of you before this body tonight is because you are asking us to give you money to pay you to do your job. So part of your job is to make sure you inform the other branch of government when such actions occur. And also, especially in the emergency management aspect, you have an obligation. So if you didn't, you wouldn't have to be before us right now asking for money, hat in hand, asking for new positions and et cetera. So I'm just giving you a friendly reminder that you have an obligation to do that. With that said, I want to go back to the thing. I do find one thing odd about as you call them, I do like how they came up with the title. They must have contacted the school department, the Safe Street program, because when I was small, my mother used to say, don't play in the street because it's dangerous. Go play at the park where it's safe. But for some reason, the city has has a complete, it's kind of like bizarro world opposite, which is go play in the street, but don't play in the park, it's closed. Which by the way, I find amazing, because traditionally you would say don't play in the street, but we're encouraging it. What does give me concern, what gives me great concern is that, Commissioner, I appreciate you participating, but the fact that it seems like even when I presume you weighed in on the public safety aspect, and also the colonel, and the fact that they didn't take into consideration that this would create consternation on those streets, especially neighborhood streets where people, older folks, people with health issues, that all of a sudden they'd be further closed off from society, and thinking that maybe they can't get an emergency vehicle through, et cetera, it does give me concern that I'm sure both of you expressed that concern, and the planning department, the administration chose to turn instead of a blind eye, a blind ear to it, a silent ear. That gives me great concern. This whole thing seems to be predicated on basically just trying to push the buttons of the citizenry. You've been on solitary confinement. You've told them they can't go to parks. You've told them they can't do every day. They're losing their jobs. They're being laid off. And now on top of it, you're blocking off their street. That's something that happens. That's like something that happens in China. So I just think, and then more importantly, because you didn't notify the actual people, not you, not the colonel, but I reflected, since all of you participated, that it falls, and Mr. Mancini, all for you, that you should have at least notified at least a week or 2 weeks in advance the people that live in the street who are going to be impacted. I know that whenever I'm doing anything changes, whether it's a sidewalk program, a street program, a parking program, a speed hump program, we have numerous conversations with people that live on that street that are impacted on. And I find it odd that we talk about stakeholders, but the two important stakeholders, which is the citizens who live on that street, weren't notified, and the other branch of government. And I don't blame Commissioner, the Colonel, or the Director, but I do ask you, as you have a fiduciary obligation, to make sure, so you need to be the gatekeepers in that process, because it was unfair to the constituents, because all I did was spend phone calls all weekend long about why is my street closed. And that was very concerning. And they said, I don't understand. I can't go to the park, but I can play in the street. It made no sense. And in fact, just the opposite. I don't know how many times we asked police to ask them to break up the neighborhood basketball court that gets put up in the middle of the street. And we say, go to the local park. Instead, now we're saying, put those back up. It's just bad messaging. It's bad coordination, and it's just bad political policy.
Can I respond?
If you want to get to Commissioner, you're more than welcome to. Come on, Commissioner, hop in the scrum.
So, you call it bizarre. The purpose of this, in closing, and I was participating in the problem that we have with COVID-19 and the devastation it was having in our community. And when we had India Point full of people in the midst of this crisis, we looked at our options in closing off the parks. I hear you and I understand, but this wasn't done haphazardly or without a lot of thought and consideration. We were having...
No, but Commissioner, it was done without consultation and consulting of the legislative branch of government, which funds all of you, and the constituents that it impacts you. See, the problem is, that's the problem. It was done in a vacuum, sir. That's the problem. The public and this branch of government has every right to know what the executive branch is doing. When you promote an executive order to impart some aspects martial law on its public, the citizenry, the legislative branch should know what you're doing. That's part of it. So right. I appreciate that the executive branch did a world search of thoughtfulness, but made sure the citizens and the legislative branch was X'd out of that conversation. That is the problem. So I strongly recommend that at this time, you probably should just hold your powder, because you can't win on that. Because those are the two important stakeholders that this administration chose to not brief be brought in and iced out during this process.
Okay.
And on top of it, ignored their concerns.
Mr. Chairman.
So if you really want to get into this scrum, you're more than welcome to.
Well, when you call a decision bizarre, yeah, I'm going to defend it because I was a part of that. And
well,
you can say
it's
that.
still bizarre.
Well, listen, you can say that.
Closing off your street in a unilateral, impromptu application upon the citizens without their notice nor consultation with their legislative branch of government is inappropriate, sir.
Okay.
That is the point, sir. You are not, you nor the executive branch is a unilateral form of government. This is a republic. And I understand that during these times of crisis, executive branches sometimes get a little over their skis. And we're seeing that all across this nation. My job is to make sure you folks don't get too far over your skis.
I understand.
In which you then abuse the very trust the public has put in your hands.
I understand.
So I'm done having this conversation this time. We're gonna have further conversation about it, and I'll be more than welcome to you to the full-blown scrum of it. But right now, let's get to the finances.
Okay. Well, I won't say anything. Your recommendation then.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can we go back to the zone cameras and police red light cameras? What I'd like to know is that I do appreciate the internal and the treasurer talking about the force majeure of the contracts, in particular, the school zone traffic cameras. School zone traffic cameras, I would think there'd be a strong argument that we shouldn't have to be paying that portion since they cannot be functioned in theory. As all of you know, every major retailer and outlet for the past month has utilized that clause as a reason why not to pay rent. So billions of dollars have not been paid in rent and fees for this particular point, for this particular issue where we are in this serious situation. So the question is, and I mentioned it actually a month and a half ago during a conversation with the administration and the city solicitor's office, and they said, oh, we're looking at it. And it seems to me we're looking at a lot of things, but we're not doing the actions to protect the public and the public treasury. So my question is, when will we know whether or not we will have to pay those fees for, in this case, the school zone cameras? When will we know definitively? Does anybody know in this panel?
I can't tell you definitively. The law department is in discussion with the vendor. And like anything else, it's not clear in the language. So we're trying to resolve it. I can't tell you a week or 30 days because I don't know. We are actively looking at and communicating with our vendor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Cheverini?
Yes, sir.
Solicitor?
Yes, sir.
The commission just testified that the language is ambiguous. Is the commissioner correct that there is no force majeure condition or in the contract? Is that correct, sir?
I am not part of the review of the team. There is a team reviewing all of the contracts. I'd have to talk to Jeff Dana to provide an opinion. I have not reviewed the contract.
Can you take a look at the contract tonight and tomorrow and report to the committee and let us know if that clause or condition is in the contract?
Will do.
Thank you. It's a simple matter of reviewing the contract. All right. So, and next thing is the school zone cameras themselves. Also, Mr. Cheverini, is there a termination clause in it?
Sir, likewise, I have not reviewed the contracts. I do not know.
So please look at those two things, because if the schools do not reopen even this September, we will then be put in a continuing bind that we're paying for a service that actually isn't actually being conducted. So I think it'd be behooves us to understand. And do you know when the law department will have their review finished on all the city contracts and whether or not we can utilize that particular clause, or in this case the health issue, COVID-19, as the justification not to pay rent or lease payment, sir?
I do not know, but I think last week you had made a request for the department to conduct that review. I did forward the request to the solicitor, and I know they're reviewing the contracts. I do not know the timeline. I will ask him. to get a more definite date for you.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do is, we'd like to make sure we get it, and especially probably either before or on when the city solicitor's office comes before for their budget review. They can make sure that the note, Mr. Clerk, that that's part of their, or Madam Clerk, make sure the city solicitor presents that information. All right. Thank you. Next, I want to go to where's the number? The miscellaneous materials and supplies. At this time, I guess what was budgeted for the present budget was $129,000. It looks like your projected spend $138,000, and then you're looking for an increase of $213,000. Can you just give us what that miscellaneous materials and supplies is lined for, what you've been spending the money on now for this present fiscal year, and why do you need an increase for the next fiscal year? That's 54830.
Mr. Chair, can you direct me to the account?
Yeah, 54830, sir.
Page 32.
Oh. Page 32, but account number 54830.
Yeah, could I defer to Ms. Richards? I believe she has the list of expenditures.
Ms. Richards, do you have that? Can you explain what that is for, what you've spent the money on, and why do you need an additional increase, ma'am?
So for the additional increase in this year's budget, there is $126,000 in for body-worn cameras for the recruits, for 50 body-worn cameras. And there's also additional equipment in there required for the recruits for the training academy.
Thank you.
I can give you a complete list, but that's pretty much everything that's in there for the recruits.
Please, thank you. Please follow the internal auditor. And talking about that, Chief, I know what you're requesting is for a new academy for this upcoming fiscal year. How many member academy are you looking to create, sir?
We're looking for a 50 officer academy.
Okay. And then how many officers, what's the latest count of retirees that we expect for this end of this fiscal year? How many officers retired so far at this point in time, I should say?
This fiscal year 11 to this point since July 1st. Usually in a contract year, this is a contract year. The FOP has not had a contract since July 1st. As you know, we're in negotiations. Whenever there's a contract year, there's usually a bump in retirees, depending on how the contract goes. We normally have about a dozen to 15 on an average year, and it could be as high as 20 to 30 in a contract year. So to this point, we've lost 11. I think we will be on course to lose a regular complement through the budget cycle, but next year could be a higher number.
So let's talk about the academy. How long will it take you? How long? It takes you approximately about, if the money's in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, it'll take you from what point to what point to actually get, to actually have bodies in the school?
Certainly, we've been delayed by COVID-19. We were anticipating starting in February, and we just don't know how this is going to play out. But we're still planning on February and taking us through June to finish that academy through the end of June.
And where will the academy be held? Where will you be having the academy itself?
We'll need a new location, and that's reflected in the budget. Chad Brown has been condemned, so Public Properties is working on facilitating a new training location.
So let's talk about that. So they haven't found a new training location yet for you?
Correct.
Okay. So Chad Brown itself, I remember we had that conversation last year about that the city spent, I don't know, like $500,000 on Chad Brown for new Havoc system. And then, of course, then we just let the roof collapse, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Mancini, where are we on that particular issue? So now the building's condemned. We got a brand new Havoc system, and now the building's condemned. So now the city lost all that money. So what's the plan? What's the plan over there?
I respectfully defer to the commissioner.
Commissioner, what's the plan over there, sir?
So we cannot use Chad Brown. It's cost
Yes, I'm aware
prohibitive.
of it.
Say it again.
No, I'm well aware of it.
So-
But we also became aware of it that prior, a couple of years ago, the city invested, I don't know, $500,000 in a new havoc system of some sort inside it. And then of course, then the building then became further, I guess, deteriorated. So my point now, the point that we lost all that money, the new system, and now, so is our plan to raise the building? Is our plan to rehab the building? Is our plan to sell the building?
I have no idea what the plan is for that site. We are about to go to an RFP for a new training site.
To actually purchase one or to rent one, sir?
Both. We're looking at both options. So in the RFP that is expected to come out soon, that it'll have various options to lease to own, and to own outright.
Commissioner in Chief, what kind of actual building do you actually need, like what kind of building would it be?
You know,
Is it just for school? Is it classroom space? Or is it,
yeah, I mean, truth be told, we, Johnson and Wales has been good to us, allowing us to use their facility for physical training. We don't have that site, and so if it weren't for the goodwill of our community, so we're looking for, a classroom setting to host a police academy, 20,000 square feet. All we need is a shell and a place to, train our folks, and the physical training can continue at another site, or ideally at the site in which we're going to be seeking. So it's not more than.
The building you're looking for has class space, possible classroom space, and then physical athletic space, right?
Yes.
So presently right now, doesn't the city, or at least we know of numerous classroom spaces that the city has available, and then as for, you need indoor athletic space?
Ideally.
Like a gym?
Yes.
Right? So could we not just pre-arrange to utilize our rec centers, one of our rec centers, and then also use one of our school facilities, or I know we have those built spaces there, in which now we can actually then, two things can happen. One, using one of our school facilities could be a positive thing, because you could possibly end up sending a positive message to see if kids or parents saw them being trained. And on the athletics side, New Narcotic would more than welcome to have the police academy do their calisthenics and their training at New Narcotic.
Adestini is also available. Very attractive.
Right? So, that's a perfect example where we actually have existing buildings, and why don't we try to use them while we can?
Yeah.
So I would ask you to look into that if you could.
Okay, will do.
This way it doesn't inhibit, because how much will that cost? That's going to cost us some money, right? To rent it from somebody, to buy.
It is.
Okay, and then in this proposed budget, Mr. Mancini, you probably know, is the total amount of cost for the academy, is the idea, Chief, I'm sorry, let me go back, Chief, is the idea that the police academy will start in February and finish in, you think what, you're talking about next February, right?
Finish in July of 21. It would run 20 weeks through, from February 10th to June 30, and I believe the remaining 4 weeks of the academy time will spill into the new fiscal year, FY #22.
Correct.
Okay.
24-week academy.
And so, Mr. Mancini, you would know, maybe they'd also know, does this budget reflect an entire year, or just that particular, it was a 24-week training?
Only the 20 weeks.
I'm sorry.
Only the 20 weeks of salary that occurs in the fiscal year, and the remaining 4 weeks will be included in the FY22 budget.
Thank you. Gina, you just review that, double check, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And then, yeah. All right, so what I'm gonna do is that at this time, do anybody have any more questions this time on the police side?
I have one.
I do also, Mr. Chair.
All right, Councilman Taylor, you have some questions?
Yeah, just quickly, as far as the Police and Fire Academy, I thought they were looking for, not saying wherever, someplace in my ward. Is that correct? What happened? What happened there?
Public property was charged with spearheading that, and so we had to put an RFP together to meet our needs, both in police and fire, with 3 different options. So as far as any specific sites, I don't think one was identified at this point.
But that's still considered, or no? We'll find out when the RFP comes out.
Sorry, I think all sites are considered.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I can,
internal order? Yep, internal order?
that item is still in committee.
Yeah,
That has
I
not
know.
been started.
Which
Nothing
item are you
has
talking, which item?
If we're talking about the recruit, the classroom place, the police and fire combined, that's still in
Yep.
the committee. We've had no movement on that. There's no direction.
Okay. So then, Mr. Mancini, and I advise you to connect, and the Commissioner connect with the internal auditor to have those outstanding questions answered if you're looking for movement on that issue.
Yeah, I don't think you can put out an RFP with something still pending in committee when that item has already been awarded.
You are correct. So once again, I instruct Mr. Mancini, the Commissioner needs to talk to the internal auditor along with the city solicitor to address those issues if you're looking to go an RFP out.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I might, to address the internal auditor, I believe it's my understanding that a withdrawal letter was expected to be submitted either by public property or to public property, but I can confirm that with the public property director and get back to the internal auditor.
Thank you.
So, just very quickly, was it, so the Commissioner and the Chief, were you instructed in any form of fashion to try to save or cut any of your budget whatsoever? And if so, what did you?
Could you repeat your question?
Everybody has been very animated about COVID-19 in this entire evening's conversation, but so far the budget that's been presented to this council has been zero urgency of any financial issues facing the city of Providence. This budget so far has pay raises, new jobs, no tax increase, and more revenue. And I'm just trying to get to the bottom how the city of Providence seems to be the only one government in the nation that hasn't addressed that portion. And COVID-19 has been a constant conversation of why you're doing what, where, and how, but yet, so far, every budget that's come before us has shown no austerity measures, nor any type of reflection on what's going on. So I was wondering to the Colonel and the Commissioner, were you instructed by the administration to do any type of proposal for any types of changes or any austerity measures in your budget or budget?
Yeah, so we were asked to submit a budget based on a percentage decline, and without affecting obligated contracts and things of that nature. So yes, we did do that exercise and we did submit that to the administration.
And what was that percentage decline, as you said? What was the request? How much?
30% cut.
So I guess we definitely didn't achieve it because there is no, actually, the budget actually goes up, right, in both fire and police. So therefore it went the other way. which by the way just further lends, and I understand it's public safety, further lends into the narrative that seems that every department has had no sense of urgency whatsoever, that we have, at least in my estimation, a financial issue facing the city of Providence today and tomorrow. And I'm just trying, so I commend that the administration mentioned 30%, but so far I haven't seen one department yet achieve anything of any type of cuts. In fact, every department seems to be the same or increasing. And we're just trying to understand what's happening in Providence, because if it's working here in Providence, we were thinking about petitioning Washington D.C. and the rest of the nations and letting them know how we've solved the financial problem COVID-19 here, and we want to apply it to the rest of the country. So we're actually in a fact-finding mission. We're putting a report together, then to present to the President, Congress, and everybody throughout the nation. So I was wondering, could you then just help us with that process? And if you can help us with that, because we still can't figure that out.
So each department director was requested to submit a budget based on a 30% reduction. And we went through that exercise, and we submitted that to the administration, showing what a 30% reduction, if we could achieve it, would look like in impacting our services and our mission in each of the departments. So it wasn't just, a thought and then nobody did it. We actually did it and identified what it would look like with a reduction, whether it's a full 30% or something in between.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, and Madam Clerk, make note of that, so we'll go find those reports. Thank you. And I think it's getting late in the evening, so first of all, I want to thank everybody for participating. So I'm going to be Commissioner, thank you, Chief,
thank you,
Director, and all the other department heads. Thank you for participation and listening to this grand experiment of ours. I'm going to take a motion to, what's it called? I want to get the proper one. Entertain a motion to what? Okay, we're going to entertain a motion to continue the testimony for the Department of Communications and Fire Department until the meeting tomorrow at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Can I have that motion?
So moved.
By Vice Chair, second. By Councilman Taylor, I think.
I'm on mute. Yep, sorry, second.
Discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Motion to stand at ease, or?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
For the clerk, adjourned by Vice Chair, I think, and second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you.
Be well.
You as well.
Mr. Chairman, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yo,
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Thanks, Colonel.
thank you.